The sudden change caused the surrounding crowd to open a gap, and immediately squeezed to both sides of the square, and then their shocked eyes fell on Tina, who had landed from the air, and each of them murmured absent-mindedly. "It's so beautiful, so domineering, so mature. Shu Ma, Moki, Kabaji, let's go." Bucky didn't have time to call out their names one by one, greeted them, pushed through the crowd, and ran away. Kabaji and the others behind him also realized that something was wrong and ran away quickly. "Don't try to run away, Tina won't let you go." Tina stared sharply at the backs of Bucky and the others, and was about to chase after them, when the surrounding crowd immediately gathered around, and many cameras flickered. "Beautiful lady, please tell us which entertainment company you belong to. We are willing to report and publicize you for free for such a beautiful you. Miss has such a temperament. Even the eyes that stare at me are so beautiful. Please make me your loyal fan." "Who stared at you, you unscrupulous narcissist?" "This beautiful lady stared at me." The surrounding crowd was in a mess, but Tina was so restrained that she couldn't even walk on the moon. "Colonel Tina, hurry up, we will help you cut off the air." The three disguised sailors brought by Tina stretched their hands to block the crowd, pushed back, and tried their best to make an open space. "Tina will remember you." After Tina finished speaking, she finally stepped on the moon, jumped a few times in the air, and disappeared into the encirclement, leaving only a black figure and everyone's regretful eyes. "Ah. Colonel Tina said she remembered me. You bastard, Colonel Tina clearly remembers me." "Hey. Stop arguing over such trivial matters, Colonel Tina was the closest to me just now." The three sailors cursed at each other and were crushed by the crowd in the blink of an eye. Bucky has been running around in the front. Although Tina and Smoker are both colonels of the Navy headquarters, but one has been running around on the Great Route all year round, and the other is stationed in the weakest East China Sea. The experience and means of the former will definitely be higher than the latter, and judging from the blow just now, it is very likely that Tina has mastered domineering, and it will not be easy to deal with her own devil fruit. The surrounding buildings and terrain are very complicated. After escaping for a while, Bucky detoured into an alley, and when he turned around, although he didn't see Tina, Mochi was the only one left behind. Bucky asked with a black face, "Where are the others?" Mochi also looked back suspiciously, turned his head and scratched the back of his head helplessly. Bucky pointed to the 30-meter-high clock tower in the sky and said, "Let's search separately. I'll go east, you go west, and then we'll meet in front of that clock tower." The two then split up. There are many areas in Lanang Port that are warehouses for stacking items. These areas are sparsely populated and very empty. As long as there are pedestrians, they can be seen at a glance. And after crossing a few streets, as soon as Bucky came out of the alley, he saw 4 people walking towards this side carrying a sedan chair. It seemed that they had deliberately chosen this location. Bucky retracted his body in the shadow of the alley in an instant. He still remembered the sedan chair covered with a light veil. The person who should be sitting in it should be the idol king Lilina, but she seemed to have left Navison. Just got here. Bucky's eyes turned, like a light ape, he climbed up the wall in an instant, jumped onto a roof with a very good view, squinted his eyes at the sedan chair moving forward, and quickly separated his hands. 2 hands rushed to the side of the sedan chair in the blink of an eye, and knocked on the back of the necks of the 2 bearers behind them separately. The 2 fell unconscious on the ground. Just as he was about to look back to see what had happened, he was knocked on the back of the neck instantly, and then passed out. What's going on? The light gauze curtain of the sedan chair was lifted by a slender hand, and the figure inside looked out in a daze, and then shouted in shock, Ah, what's wrong with you?" As soon as the words fell, she was pulled out by a hand stretched in. At this time, Lilina was wearing a very attractive plain casual clothes, and she looked at Bucky in horror. Do you want what are you doing? If you want money, I will give it to you, please let me go." A sinister smile was drawn at the corner of Bucky's mouth, and his right hand was pinched on Lilina's tender neck in an instant. "The number 1. I don't mean to offend, but please cooperate, or your neck will be broken." With tears in the corners of Lilina's eyes, she wanted to speak but couldn't, so she nodded helplessly. "Thank you for your cooperation." Bucky used the dagger he carried with him to cut off a few strips of light gauze on the sedan chair, and tied them firmly to Lilina's mouth and hands. The latter looked pitifully looking at Bucky, he made a whimpering sound, and the tears fell to the ground like free money. "Trouble woman, don't cry." Bucky looked coldly at Lilina. "Otherwise I'll strip you naked and throw you here." Lilina's whimpering stopped abruptly, and she stopped making a sound. Bucky held it on his shoulder like a sack, and continued to swipe eastward. In order to prevent others from discovering that he is carrying the idol king of this country, Buggy always sneaks in the shadow of the alley, and when passing a spacious intersection with no shelter, he will choose to shave when no one passes by. Across the past. After passing through several streets, he finally saw a few familiar figures in a secluded alley. Buggy quickly leaned his body against the corner of the wall and placed him on Lilina. He covered the latter's mouth with his hands, and slightly pricked up his ears eavesdrop. Hey, why did you two stop Tina? In the middle of the alley, Tina took off the lady's thin cigarette from her mouth, sandwiched it between the index finger and middle finger of her left hand, supported her left arm with her right hand, and exhaled a puff of smoke ring very gracefully from her mouth. Miss Tina, on behalf of our company, I sincerely invite you to join our company. An outstanding lady like you should have a brighter future. This is Mermaid Warrior talking. The penguin boy next to him also sincerely persuaded. Why not? You are so beautiful and have such a temperament. If you appear on the screen, you will definitely become a superstar that everyone is looking forward to. Compared with our company's best idol, Tianwang Lilina doesn't give in too much. As long as our company packs it up, you will be the next idol king, so we may have opportunities to cooperate in the future. Lilina. Tina was a little moved, and the fingers holding the thin cigarette involuntarily increased her strength, squeezing the thin cigarette. Are you artists under the Pat Company? Mermaid Warrior and Penguin Boy said proudly at the same time. Yes, the best performing company in the whole Santander. What does she want to do? Buggy became suspicious, and Tina's tone obviously showed signs of loosening. Could it be that she really wanted to give up her Navy status and make her debut as an idol, or did she have any plans? Buggy was about to poke his head out to peek over there, when suddenly a hand came out of nowhere and patted his shoulder, and a gloomy voice came from his ear. Buggy, what are you doing? Buggy was taken aback. His whole body trembled instinctively, cold sweat dripped from his forehead. It was even more exciting than being caught cheating. Turning around, he found that it was Shu Ma, the damned idiot. He breathed a sigh of relief with lingering fear, and quickly put his hand to his mouth to make a silent gesture, and asked in a low voice, "Why are you here?" Shuma stuck out his tongue mischievously, and said with a laugh, "Because you guys are running too fast, I have to follow behind those two interesting heroes, hee hee." Buggy looked at Shuma's flickering eyes, and knew that it must not be like this. This kid definitely followed those two people halfway, and he didn't get lost because he couldn't keep up. Are those two heroes here? Let me see. Shuma hurriedly leaned out, looked into the alley, and was pulled back by Buggy. Okay, stop making trouble. Oh. Shuma suddenly elongated his tone weakly, and then became interested in Lilina, whose mouth was covered by Buggy, and asked while poking the latter's fair cheek with his fingers. Hello, white. Is it painted with white dye? I remember seeing you on that hot island. By the way, do you want to eat something delicious? As he spoke, he grinningly took out a bright red destruction pepper from his body, and stretched out his hand to get close to it. Lilina looked at the approaching destruction pepper, smelled a strong pungent smell, and shrank back to the wall behind in horror. Then, Buggy felt a slight tremor in his hand, and a thick liquid splashed on his hand. He hurriedly looked back, only to see Lilina's body trembling, her face humming. Sneezing, couldn't stop at all. All the snot and saliva sprayed on the palm of my hand. Sure enough, a woman, no matter how beautiful she looks on the outside, in fact, the snot and saliva will not look like nectar and jade dew. The appearance is indeed the appearance, just like a very attractive woman like Lilina, who grinds her teeth when she sleeps, farts and hiccups bar. Buggy stopped thinking about it, patted the pepper off Shuma's hand, pretended to be careless and wiped the sticky snot and saliva on Shuma's body, and reprimanded him plausibly. Zyoma, don't do such stupid things again. When Buggy's hand left Lilina's mouth and wiped the stain on Shuma's body, Lilina began to inhale intermittently, her mouth opened wide, and she made a trembling sound. Not good. Hearing the movement, Buggy quickly covered Lilina's mouth with his hands, but it was too late. When he covered Lilina's mouth, a shocking big sneeze had already come out. Ah! Lilina sucked in her reddened nose, her eyelids drooped slowly, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Buggy's hands were stickier than the ones just now. With a dark face, he quickly carried Lilina on his shoulders, wiped the stains from his hands on the latter's slacks, and ran away quickly. At the same time, he was yelling at Shu Ma as a troublemaker, and the thought in his heart had already cut him into 8 pieces. Shuma ran beside Buggy indifferently. Okay, don't be angry. Buggy shook his head in his heart, nothing to do with this guy. The formation of black guns. Dozens of black spears stabbed from behind like sharp arrows. Buggy sprinted forward at a faster speed. After a little distance, he turned around and raised his right foot, kicking out a slashing airflow, destroying the formation of these black spears. But in a hurry, the power of Lanjiao was really limited. The black spear swayed in the air. Although the momentum slowed down a bit, it still rushed over on the black gun that turned out of the fruit. His dazzled hands grasped more than a dozen black guns in his hands in the blink of an eye, but the forward momentum and domineering force of the black guns tore the skin on his hands. Looking at Tina, who was getting closer and closer, Buggy threw back the black gun in his hand. I saw Tina looking at the dozens of black guns thrown back calmly, her right foot stretched straight out like a square iron railing, and took it out. The several black guns rushing forward were bundled into a bundle and dropped to the ground, and then her square right foot returned to its original shape. Tina glanced sharply at Buggy and Shuma. Buggy the clown and your accomplices, don't try to escape from Tina. Tina is not as easy to deal with as flower hunters. Buggy tried to negotiate. I have no grievances with you, you don't need to chase after me, everyone should stop in moderation. Tina will not let go of the pirates that appear in front of her. This is the glory of the Navy. If you are allowed to escape in front of Tina, Tina will be very angry. Don't talk about these things. Buggy rolled his eyes, showing a sly look. You, an old leftover girl, are chasing after me, so you probably fell in love with me, right? Although Tina looks very young on the outside, she is actually over 30 years old, but she is a very strong woman, and she has been focusing on catching pirates for so many years. Of course, she herself does not think that 32 years old is a very old age. She thinks that she can contribute to the Navy for a few more years instead of rushing to start a family. Even if her colleagues arrange a blind date for her, she laughs. The land was rejected, and it belonged to an unattainable, leftover girl peak in the Navy headquarters. However, as soon as the words, older leftover girl, came out, Tina's expression changed significantly. Buggy the clown, do you know what you're talking about? I've become angry from embarrassment. Buggy moved back without a trace. If you continue to chase me, it means that you like me, and then I will tell the world. Even the flower hunter who is standing behind you now, Smoker, would know about it. Smog? Hearing the name of her friend for many years, Tina looked back subconsciously, and there was no one behind her, only to realize that she had been deceived, and immediately looked forward. Buggy had already run away. Sure enough, as Smoker said, he is a cunning pirate. But, don't try to run away. Tina frowned, looking at the empty and unobstructed street ahead, and shot 2 black javelins diagonally from her feet. It landed on the ground, and then jumped onto the black javelin's body, pressing down. The body of the black javelin was bent into an arc, and the elastic force of the back pressure burst out suddenly. Tina's body turned into an afterimage in the air, only tens of meters away. She crossed her hands and swung forward continuously in an instant. Countless javelins came out of her hands and pierced Buggy's back. Suddenly, a smoky figure appeared in the alley, waving a fan-like tobacco rod to unload the flying javelin in several different directions. Then the cigarette rod in his hand was placed obliquely in front of his body, slightly backward, and suddenly burst out with a strong force and swung forward, colliding with Tina's kick. The huge force of the impact made the two of them take 2 steps back. Alex. Seeing someone standing behind him, Buggy also stopped and looked back. Alex smiled awe-inspiringly. Leave this extraordinary woman to me. You go first, and I will meet you at Gallo. Buggy's heart moved, and he asked, are you okay? I'm more familiar with the environment here than you are. As long as you leave, I have a plan to get out. Thank you. Shu Ma. Let's go first. Buggy didn't hesitate, carrying Lilina on his shoulders, and took Shu Ma to the distance. Are you trying to protect them? Tina looked at Alex sharply. The guy who protects the pirates must be an accomplice. Tina is going to arrest you now. Then let's try. A sneer appeared on the corner of Alex's mouth. I haven't fought the Navy for a long time. As they spoke, the two confronted each other, started a fierce fight, and made endless sounds of weapons hitting. Thanks to Alex's help, Buggy and Shuma managed to get rid of Tina's entanglement, and they ran to the towering clock tower. While following Buggy, Shuma asked, Buggy, did you see it just now? What did you see? That mermaid warrior has a red eye on his left wrist. Is that a birthmark? What? Buggy stopped and looked at Shuma in shock. Why didn't you say it earlier? Hey. Is there something wrong? Shuma went to chase the jackal at that time, so he didn't know about the one-eyed family. During the process of heading to this port, Buggy himself forgot to explain to Shuma in detail because he kept thinking about something. Buggy frowned, looked back and glanced at the distance. He had already run so far, and it was unrealistic to go back again. After thinking about it, he asked, does that penguin boy have a penguin on his wrist? Red eyes? No, Shuma shook his head, Only the mermaid warrior has that birthmark. N. Buggy replied, and then told Shuma about the one-eyed family's affairs. Did the Kia ingredients be snatched away by those nasty bastards? Shuma gritted his teeth with an angry expression on his face. It's a shame that they look so heroic. Buggy said silently in his heart, no, it's not like at all. Amid Shuma's scolding along the way, the two finally came to the bell tower, where Mikkel, Kabaji and Moki had been waiting there, looking at Buggy and Shuma who came late. Uncle Redball, what are you carrying on your shoulder? Mikkel walked up first, looked suspiciously at Lilina on Buggy's shoulder, and said in surprise, why is it a human? As she said that, she suffered from tuberculosis again, and said with a slight blush on her face, Uncle Hongchu, how could you kidnap this woman? You can't act recklessly, just. Even if we are pirates, we must have principles, and now that the lemons are all gone, why are you still in the mood to do such a thing? Shuma couldn't understand Mikkel's words, and scratched his head inexplicably. He never asked Buggy what he was doing, and he didn't feel surprised by Buggy's Lilina, just like Buggy's shoulder. Not a woman with outstanding temperament and appearance, but a strong reindeer food. Moki and Kabaji were also a little puzzled. Captain Buggy. Buggy put Lilina on the ground. The latter seemed to be very cowardly. She was carried all the way by Buggy, but she was crying secretly without any struggle or resistance. Buggy rubbed his sore shoulders, glanced at everyone, and explained, the one-eyed family is the behind-the-scenes boss of Pate Company, and the popular Idol King can bring them huge benefits every year. Such a valuable Liancheng's cash cow is definitely far ahead of others in their hearts, since they have captured Kaya to blackmail us. Of course we can also use this woman to blackmail the other party. Don't think of anything else with your stupid brains. Everyone suddenly nodded, and their eyes fell on Lilina, who was not sure why. Lilina was a little scared by the eyes of everyone, and she curled up timidly. Buggy asked Mochi to take a white mask and a light-colored cloak, which he had used in Rogue Town. In order to prevent accidents, he specially asked Mochi to bring it, which happened to be available at this time. Put on this mask and cloak. Buggy threw these two things to Lilina, and his tone was not too cold. With this woman's personality, there was no need to make too many threats. Sure enough, Lilina didn't resist, and whimpered to untie the veil tied around her mouth and hands. Mikkel. Buggy gestured, and Mikkel walked over to untie the veil from Lilina's body, and put the mask and cloak on her. If someone saw that the Idol King was kidnapped by a group of pirates, I am afraid that they will become the focus of everyone. Fortunately, the people in the entire port are now attracted by the mermaid warrior, the penguin boy, and Tina, who suddenly caused a boom. There were very few people under the clock tower, which made Buggy move so smoothly. Next, we are going to Jalo, and we will go along the north for about 5 kilometers. If we walk, we will probably be able to arrive at noon tomorrow. Buggy said, when we get to Gallo, I will tell you some things to do. Everyone nodded and said yes. Santon City's acting industry is indeed top-notch, but there are two extremes. The difference between the most outstanding performing arts industry is the transportation industry. This country doesn't even have decent means of transportation, which is why Buggy has no choice but to choose to walk. Without too much delay, after securing a day's supply of food and fresh water, Buggy and the others trekked north. Unknowingly, when the starry night came, everyone picked an open space with few insects and snakes, gathered dry firewood, lit a bonfire, and sat together. After Buggy ate some food, he sat quietly under the back of a tree beside him. He has been practicing fruit ability and thinking about the development of fruit ability since he set off from Cape Twins. His body splitting has been able to reach the state of sand grains, but it consumes a lot of energy when used, and this state can last for tens of seconds. With more physical exertion, the body that could have been split into grains of sand can only be split into strips and blocks. However, since defeating Aaron until now, Buggy found that the longest time for his body to become sand grains has been continuously extending, and it has reached more than 1 minute at present, and he was secretly surprised by almost doubling the time increase. He also kept thinking about why this happened on the way of sailing, trying to make a reasonable explanation. The battle with Aaron tends to be an irreconcilable life and death battle. Only such a battle can exercise a form of battle instinct consciousness in the body, which will increase the body's strength little by little on weekdays. In his previous life, Buggy could often hear such reports. The mother who was out of breath even carrying a rice bag on weekdays was able to lift several tons of trucks to save her dying children. This is the basis of Buggy's understanding of fighting instinct consciousness. Once the belief is firm, a powerful force will erupt in times of crisis, but the physical strength of human beings in this world is very exaggerated, and the explosive force may not disappear, but will remain forever. Inside the body, it keeps nourishing and nourishing the body like a steady stream of water. Furthermore, the extremely harsh and unstable external environment on the Great Root will actually have an impact on the human body, continuously enhancing the body's ability to adapt. It is difficult to detect this change on weekdays, but the body itself has memory. If it is overheated or cut, it will instinctively protect it. When it encounters this situation next time, it will immediately remind and warn. And the actions made in the body itself will be transformed into subconsciousness. For example, when encountering a hot flame, the body will avoid it, and the external environment is actually constantly polishing the rough jade of the body passively. In the original book, Sauron said after leaving Sky Island that every time we pass through an island, our strength will continue to grow. Buggy didn't think it was a casual remark. It was because they experienced life and death experiences at an altitude of 10,000 meters where the air was thin, and their lung capacity and physical strength had grown, and their fighting instinct awareness would also allow them to survive the voyage in the future. Their strength keeps improving. These are just Buggy's guesses. The improvement of strength has something to do with the accumulated practice and the potential of the person himself. For example, the three main forces of the Straw Hats have full potential and a solid foundation. This is why they grew up like this. Quick reason. After Buggy left Cape Twins, he has been trying to stimulate the arrogance in his body. According to Jabba, arrogance is a kind of potential in everyone. As long as you practice more, you can master it proficiently. But he has been unable to refine this energy in his body. He obviously had intermittent illusions several times, but when he opened his eyes, he couldn't feel it at all. It's like a Coke bottle being shaken crazily. You can clearly see that the bubbles in the bottle are constantly expanding, but the tightly tightened bottle mouth prevents this force from gushing out. He himself has experienced countless battles, large and small, on the Great Root with Roger, but with more than 10 years of comfortable life in the East China Sea, his fighting instincts have also been weakening. After more than a year on the Gravity Island after practicing, he slowly picked it up, and now he feels that he still lacks an opportunity to unscrew the bottle. As for the development of the fruit ability, in fact, splitting to the point of sand is the current limit. If it continues to split, there will be pain from the soul, which makes him unable to resist at all, and directly leads to a blank mind, and vertigo. In the body, it is currently difficult to split again. Buggy is also trying to awaken the fruit ability. The power of the fruit is actually a force that can be seen in the heart. Taking the natural system as an example, as long as you control it with your heart, it is just a way to convey the idea. Instantly elementalize any part of the body. The same is true for the ability to split fruit. As long as you think about it, your body can be scattered into countless pieces immediately, but there is a big difference between the inside and outside. How to let this power in the body break through the constraints, apply it to the outside world, and assimilate it. One thought can do it, but slowly feel this force, push it outward bit by bit, so that an outward breakthrough is formed in the body. Buggy closed his eyes at this moment. His body became split. 1 turned into 10, 10 turned into hundreds, white turned into thousands, and thousands changed. The whole body was turned into countless particles, and the whole person disappeared. There were very slight sounds in the air, the rustling of leaves, and the rustling of the wind blowing the grass. Suddenly, the blades of grass on the ground began to twitch, and 3 or 2 leaves on the tree also fell with the wind. Boom. Suddenly there was a strong buzzing sound, and the towering tree that was almost surrounded by 5 people swayed back and forth without warning. The leaves on the tree rinsed and fell, and all the sand grains of Buggy's body quickly converged to the center of the tree to form a new structure. Body. He slowly opened his eyes, took off a green leaf on his head, and put it in front of his eyes unconsciously. His eyes gradually glowed. Captain Buggy. Mochi and the others heard the movement behind the tree, hurried over and looked around vigilantly. Kabaji. Captain Buggy, is there an assassin? Mikkel was puzzled. Strange, it feels like thunder. Huma. Buggy. What's going on? Buggy looked at his numb hands, took a deep breath, and then said, it's okay. It's just that I'm researching new moves. Originally, tens of seconds of sanding the whole body left him no time to develop in depth, but as the time of sanding grew, he finally had extra energy to try a move that he had been thinking about for a long time. Shu Ma jumped in excitedly. I want to see. I want to see. I won't show it to you. Buggy stroked his chest, took a breath, and waved his hand. Go do whatever you want. This move should be very powerful, but it consumes a lot of energy. After using it once, Buggy felt exhausted, which reminded him of the move in a game he played in his previous life. Dionysus Curse. Seeing that nothing was going on around them, Mikkel and the others sat back by the campfire. Did something happen just now? Lilina timidly asked. Originally she could have sneaked away when everyone was attracted by Buggy, but her temperament seemed to be very well behaved and innocent, not only didn't run away, but instead rushed towards the other side. The thunder on the ground aroused curiosity. On the contrary, it is difficult for this kind of person to make others feel wary and distanced from her, which is probably one of the reasons why she can become an idle king. Don't ask so many questions, Kabaji said coldly. Scarf. Don't be so cruel to girls. Mikkel was very dissatisfied with Kabaji's words. Bucky finally came over from behind the tree and looked at Lilina. Tell me, who is the boss of Pate Company? The boss of the company. Lilina shrank back in fear as she watched Bucky approaching. I don't know what the boss of the company is called. Bucky continued to ask. Then let me change the question. Who are you negotiating with for your contract, daily activities and appearance fees? These. Are all in charge of my agent, and I don't know anything else. Lilina's voice was very nice, and her timid voice gave people the illusion that she was committing a crime. Although kidnapping is indeed a crime, for pirates, such a crime is just a child's play. Bucky frowned and looked at Lilina. Is there such a simple guy now? He looked back at Shu Ma, but it was hard to say. Then you haven't thought about going out on your own, or changing jobs to other companies. I just think that I can bring happiness to others, and I'm satisfied. I haven't thought about anything else. Under Bucky's pressure, Lilina's eyes began to turn red again, as if she was about to cry. Seeing that her expression didn't seem to be fake, Bucky also gave up unnecessary questioning. Then you should have your manager's phone number, right? Yes, I have. Lilina said falteringly, wiping the crystal tears from the corners of her eyes. Bucky took out the phone bug and said succinctly, dial. Lilina reached out tremblingly and dialed a number on the dial pad of the phone bug. After a while, a polite voice sounded from the other side of the phone bug. Hi. Hello. This is from Pate Company. Bucky interrupted unceremoniously. Don't talk nonsense. The top card of your company is now in the hands of the pirate Bucky. Tell your boss. Don't want to lose this cash cow, it's best to return my crew. After finishing speaking, she pointed the phone bug at Lilina. It's your turn. I. Lilina hesitated. At first they thought it was just a silly prank, but when they heard a familiar voice, the anxious expression was perfectly imitated by the phone bug. Miss Lilina, how are you? Thief, hurry up. Snapped. Bucky hung up the phone bug directly. As long as the meaning was conveyed, there was no need to make unnecessary entanglements, and the phone bug never rang again. Bucky arranged a time period for everyone to take turns to watch the night, and then each of them began to rest and build up their strength. Silent all night. In the early morning of the next day, just as Dongfang showed a fishy belly, Mikkel's voice woke everyone up. It's not good, Lilina was taken away. Everyone sat up, no sleepiness at all. Bucky sat up straight, frowned and asked, when was he taken away? Just now. For half an hour, she said she wanted to pee, and then begged me to take her to a place farther away. Girls must not let others see pee, so I took her to that remote place. In the woods. Say the point. She was taken away by a scary old witch. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Bucky pursed his lips lightly, looked at Mikkel who lowered his head and drew circles on the ground with his feet. Not to blame too much. Forget it. You are not to blame for this matter. Could it be that someone from the cyclopedic family found him just because he dialed the phone bug number? There should be no GPS positioning in this world. How the one-eyed family found themselves in such a wild place, and the timing of saving Lilina is just right, it is simply unimaginable. Bucky couldn't figure it out, and knew it was useless to think too much. After washing their faces and eating some dry food they carried with them to satisfy their hunger, they speeded up and set off to the capital of Jalo. Gallo, Chancellor of the Exchequer's residence, study. The window of the study room was open, letting in some sunlight, illuminating the whole room. Sitting on a chair and flipping through the papers was a middle-aged man in a casual nightgown. There was no sign of wrinkle on his face, and he looked hale and hearty. He looked at the document for a while, picked up the quill pen and began to scribble on the document, then put the pen down. Benson, please make me a cup of coffee. Yes, Captain. The tall man standing behind habitually licked the corner of his mouth and walked out of the room. After a while, he came in with a cup of hot coffee and put it on the desk. A cup of bitter coffee. How many times have I told you, don't call me the captain? The middle-aged man reprimanded rather dissatisfied. Yes, Master Diderot. The tall man changed his tone very awkwardly. You have to remember, we are good citizens of Santander, not pirates. At least, Don't say such eye-catching words before returning to the new world. Diderot closed slowly. Close your eyes. What's going on with Xe Navison? The information came that there was a riot. It was a good thing done by the clown Buggy, who offered a bounty of 48 million. I don't think this pirate is cruel. I remember asking you to win him over, didn't you succeed? What? Has there been a riot in Xe Navison? Benson was taken aback. This pirate is really daring. He did reject the family's invitation at the time. I thought he just hadn't heard of Kiwahe's name. But now it seems that this bastard's behavior did not take Kiwahe's flag into consideration at all. It is too arrogant. I heard that it was because his crew was taken away that he was so furious. Diderot rubbed his forehead. She should have done this. This guy has indeed made a lot of contributions to my business for many years, but he is too capricious. Last night, the manager seemed to be killing me. Call me and say that she was captured by pirates. I really don't know how long her boring farce will continue. If I can't control her with drugs, I really dare not let her out like this. Benson naturally knew who he was talking about, and replied, after all, as an idol king, she can provide us with a lot of funds for commercial performances and concerts every year. Although she has a weird temper, she is a rare cash cow. That's why I love and hate her. Diderot paused, for Buggy the clown. Try not to provoke him. I don't want to cause trouble at this juncture. As long as his request is not it's too much, find a way to contact him and satisfy him. Captain, it's just a 48 million little pirate. There's no need to be so cautious, right? Diderot said coldly. Benson, have you forgotten how we broke out of the New World? Isn't this lesson enough for you to remember? Yes. Benson lowered his head. I was kicked out by a little-known pirate, and the whole army was wiped out. Diderot's eyes flickered. The little pirates back then, who would know that they could become one of the 4 emperors who ruled the sea now. Remember, don't underestimate those humble pirates, who can know whether they will become another one in the future. 4 emperors, only by holding this power in our hands ahead of time can our strength continue to grow. He slowly picked up the hot coffee on the table, took a sip, calmed down a little, and asked again. The old guy sitting on the throne, how is the situation now? Benson replied. He can't live without drugs. Hee. Diderot blew on the coffee cup. I want a king who obeys his words. Bang, the glass fell to the ground with a crisp sound. At the door of the study, the trembling maid looked at the 2 people who were looking at each other in horror, and immediately squatted down to clean up the debris on the ground, and apologized repeatedly. I'm sorry, I'll pack up and leave. Captain, you are too careless. How could someone sneak in? Benson stretched out his scarlet tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. Yeah, I was so careless. I said that no one should come near me. Diderot shook his head regretfully. Since you heard something you shouldn't have heard, then crush her to death. The sound was not loud, but it spread to every corner of the room in an instant. No. The maid scrambled and ran towards the stairs in the corridor in panic and fear. Benson stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth, then stepped out. Soon a hoarse sound of pain could be heard, and after a while Benson brought back a dead body with blood on his face, threw the body down, and sighed with emotion. Sometimes ignorance is happiness. The corner of Diderot's mouth curled up coldly. Bury her somewhere. The luxurious Scarlet Manor near the urban area of Jalo, in the Scarlet Villa. A pair of flawless feet stepped out from the bathroom on the 2nd floor. The crystal-clear toenails are decorated like jewels. Looking up, the white and fat-free legs are presented in golden proportions, like the most beautiful masterpiece of nature. Then, a woman came out wrapped in a bath towel. She shook her wet hair and looked at the light blonde woman who was tied up on the sofa in the living room with a smile in her eyes. The fingers with rose-red nails touched the latter's chin and lifted up slightly. Nice to meet you, lovely Miss Kaya. Ew. Forgot. You can't talk yet, hee. Saying that, she then took out the handkerchief stuffed in Kaya's mouth. Kaya looked at the woman in front of her. I've seen you. You are the idol named Lilina. Lilina. This is just my stage name, but it's okay. Lilina smiled, exuding a natural charm. Tie me here. What exactly do you want to do? Even though she was as gentle as Kia, she couldn't help frowning and questioning loudly at this moment. Lilina giggled, reached out to caress Kia's smooth cheeks, hugged her, stretched out her sexy red tongue and licked her left ear lightly. Because I like you so much, I was attracted to you from the first moment I saw you. Kaya's ears were numb, her face was red and her ears were red. Her hands and feet were tightly tied, and she could only twist her body. Don't do this. It's really cute. Lilina stepped back, took off her bathrobe, revealed her beautiful figure, and changed her clothes in front of Kia without any discomfort. Over the years, I have seen countless women prettier than you, But none of them can possess the sickly and delicate temperament of yours. Just like when the wind and rain blow, they will wither immediately. Her voice gradually became gloomy, crushing such a flower bone. Just thinking about it will make my heart beat faster. Kaya tightly pursed her lips, staring at Lilina in silence. Even when I'm angry, I'm so cute. I'm only acting, so why not do it seriously? Sometimes it's interesting to play a bad witch. Lilina put on a cute floral knee-length dress, with a pure and natural smile on her face, and even her tone became like an innocent girl who didn't know the world. Do you think acting is very interesting? Just like I used to playing the role of a miserable girl bullied by pirates, the despair of not being able to control her life is really exciting. Kaya let out a sigh of relief. You think about what you want from me, don't make a fuss about it, just say it. Of course I got you. Lilina's eyes suddenly softened when she looked at Kia, as kindly as a parent looking at her children. A woman with your temperament, as long as she is cultivated, can definitely become an extraordinary woman. A popular idol who is weaker than others, as long as you have my perfect management and planning, you can definitely reach a height comparable to mine. And I can also experience the role experience of a manager, hee. Don't you think so, Kaya? As she said that, she was like the happiest elf in nature, jumping and jumping constantly, and her lively and vigorous spirit was highlighted by the colorful dress. I don't want to be an idol, it's not my dream. Kia remained calm in spite of Lilina's constant changes in mood, are making her continue to grow. No, you have to stay here with me, otherwise. Lilina will feel very lonely. Lilina just wants to treat you as a friend. As she spoke, Lilina burst into tears, looking at Kia pitifully. The loneliness in her eyes was clearly visible. You don't do this. The grievance shown on the flawless face made even Kaya turn her head away in embarrassment. Our Lilina's deep-rooted acting skills have made it difficult for people to tell when she is acting and when she is moving truth. Come on, be my best partner. While Lilina was talking, her throat started to tremble suddenly. The skin on her face visibly became loose. Her body bent slightly. She opened the cabinet next to the sofa in a panic, as if she had an asthma attack, panting, medicine. With trembling hands, she took out a medicine bottle from inside, poured out a red pill, swallowed it like a gulp, and then her breathing became steady, and her skin and figure began to recover slowly, only in the blink of an eye. The original appearance was lost, as if the scene just now was just an illusion. Kia sniffed the scent from the opening of the medicine bottle, and was startled suddenly. She looked seriously at Lilina, who was recovering from her panting. As this Alpiro Silgola. She had smelled this smell at the pharmacy in Rogtown, and she still remembered it. You know a lot. Lilina returned to her original expression, holding the medicine in her hand. This is a dream medicine that can bring youth and beauty. No. Kia said seriously, Alpiro Silgola is a kind of poisonous grass. It will absorb the vitality of the human body, and it is only a hypocritical appearance. The most important thing is that it will become addiction. Miss Lilina, please don't give up this herbal medicine anymore. The harm it has done to your body may be irreparable. It's such a beautiful thing. You actually want me to quit it, haha. Lilina laughed wildly. Her lovely face looked a little hideous at the moment. Without it, my life will become gloomy. Idle, the title of Heavenly King will also cease to exist. This is something I cannot accept. Miss Lilina, I am a doctor. Please listen to my advice. Doctors will not harm people. Lilina completely ignored what Kia was saying, poured out a bright red pill like blood from the medicine bottle, walked towards Kia slowly, and said in a charming voice, come on, eat it, you will slow down. Slow to fall in love with it. Wangdu Jalo is located in the center of the island and has the best environment in the entire island. The trees are singing and swallows are dancing. The flowers are surrounded by butterflies. The air is full of spring grass fragrance. The sky is blue and sometimes the erratic clouds attract people's attention like a vortex. Even if you lie flat on the grass and look at the sky all day long, you won't feel bored. There are many shops on the street, people come and go. There is an endless stream, and the neighbors complain to each other about their parents, and they are very friendly. Whether it is a businessman, a hawker, a farmer, a fisherman, or a soldier, there seems to be no barriers here, and there is no class distinction. However, is it really as simple as it seems? Kashi was standing guard on the side of the street. He kept looking at the two men in front of him. The two men were very affectionate when chatting, but when they turned their heads to say goodbye, their faces showed disdainful indifference. Koshi turned his head away awkwardly, not wanting to see this scene again. The conversation between people was like a performance, exaggerated and artificial, and even the joy, anger, sorrow and joy that accompanied the birth of life became so deliberately, full of hypocrisy, indifference. All of this is because of the so-called star-making activities of Pater Company. They use the fan effect of idol artists to continuously expand their influence among the people, bias the atmosphere of the entire country, and make the people become ignorant, hypocritical, and fanatical. Koshi tried to change everything, using his own strength to change the country, but it was useless. Everything he did was in vain, and he was even ordered to stand on the side of the street as a punishment. From this moment on, he lost power. In a sense, on the whole, he was abandoned by the country. Prince Koshi, you are suffering here under such a big sun, you'd better go back and rest quickly, don't hurt your delicate body. Prince Koshi wants to be sympathetic to the people and understand the sufferings of the people from the bottom up. What do you know? This is the demeanor a prince should have. Two men in aristocratic costumes walked aside, chatting with half smiles, their eyes full of sarcasm. Koshi breathed weakly. I'm sorry for your troubles. Recently, I heard that there are pirates running around in the capital. You should be careful. The expressions of the two men in aristocratic costumes changed, and they walked away muttering. The prince's words were as harsh and vicious as a curse. Who knows if he would do all kinds of insane things because of his loss of power. Koshi looked at the backs of the two, and sighed silently in his heart. The wind direction of the country was constantly changing. Everyone stood in line and approached the Minister of Finance Diderot. His power was enough to influence the entire Santander. It even built the 9-story Wanshu Pagoda with a large number of manpower, claiming that it will become the landmark of the entire royal capital. But in fact, Koshi knew that was not the case. Diderot planned it beforehand, and his plan was based on that long-standing legend, but what could he do? Even his father and king were tired of his own advice. He shrugged his shoulders decadently, as if there were hands in the abyss in his heart pulling him bit by bit into despair. The fate of this country will soon meet death. A 6 or 7-year-old girl on the street tripped over a stone and sat on the ground crying loudly. No one came to help her. Most people turned a blind eye and left indifferently. Hoarse and looking very pitiful, she tried to stand up, but she sat back on the ground with a slight movement of her knees, and the pain made her cry louder. Koshi was only less than 10 meters away from the little girl, but he watched helplessly, unable to give birth to the thought of helping the little girl. He was not good at comforting others. The little girl seemed to be too painful to rely on her own strength. Stand up. Even if I help her, a lot of troubles will happen next, and most of the children who are trapped in their own world will not listen to persuasion, but will intensify. Koshi found it very difficult, and his confidence had already faded with the wind and sun in the past 2 days. If the country is about to perish, even if it can help 1 person, 2 people, or even 100 people, what's the point? It's futile. Hey, get out of the way. Finally, a man stood up. He wore decorative glasses without lenses, full beards on both sides of his chin, and a strangely red nose. The little girl cried even harder. Originally, Koshi thought that the man would say something more and make the little girl happy with tricks, but he didn't. The man grabbed the little girl while others ignored him, and brought her to somewhere in a remote alley. What does he want to do? Koshi became a little nervous, and the restraint in his nature still prevented him from turning a blind eye and quickly following the man's footsteps. Turning around the corner, he heard the girls crying in the man's menacing and gloomy voice. You can continue to cry here. I am a human trafficker. I will sell you to the shampoo land, and then you will never see me again. Your father and your mother will become others' slaves for life. The terrifyingly quiet environment and the echoes frightened the young girl. The strangely dressed man in front of him used the most intuitive appearance to make his words more convincing. The little girl stopped crying abruptly, ignoring her knees. Pain from a fall wiped away tears as if fleeing from hell. The man sneered when he saw this. Without even turning his head, he walked towards the exit at the other end of the alley in the opposite direction from the little girl. Koshi stared blankly at the young figure running away from under his eyes. The girl who had been crying for a long time was actually pacified by the man with this simple and rude method, and stood up again, relying on her own strength. Get up. This power is, in a sense, the power of hope. He rubbed his eyes. What kind of miracle did he witness? In other words, the man in front of him might bring unimaginable hope to himself with his different way of thinking. At least this hope, it shouldn't be allowed to run away like this. Seeing that the man was about to disappear at the entrance of the alley, Koshi hurriedly chased after him, shouting, Master, please wait a moment. The red-nosed man paused, glanced back, and continued to walk forward casually. With a flash, Koshi stood in front of the opponent, and said sincerely, Master, I saw what happened just now. Can you also help me solve the confusion in my heart? Please. Don't get in my way. I have no obligation to help you, it was just a matter of convenience. The red-nosed man said indifferently, preparing to bypass Koshi. I still have things to do. Kashi kept pestering him. I am the prince of this country, master. Please tell me if you have anything. I will find a way to help you solve it. Are you a prince? The red-nosed man finally stopped and looked at Kashi. Yes, my name is Boulder Dursley Sirik Steel Mulse Cozy, the eldest son of the current king of Santander, absolutely true. In order to convince the other party, Koshi uttered his full name fluently and quickly without any ambiguity. Hearing what Kashi said, the red-nosed man rolled his eyes slyly. In this case, remember my name is Buffett. Koshi tried his best to be respectful to Buggy, who called himself Buffett along the way. After seeing the other party's different handling methods from ordinary people, Koshi always believed that the other party was not a simple person. Then, with Bucky's consent, Koshi took Buggy to a secluded restaurant, chose a quiet corner, and asked, Mr. Buffett, if a person is sick, the doctor can use the grinder herbs and superb surgery, but the country is sick, what to do? Buggy squinted his eyes slightly, and took a sip of the tea that was served. That depends on where the disease occurs. The disease that rots inside continues to spread everywhere. Buggy felt that speaking like this was awkward, so he coughed. Cough. Don't play silly charades with me. Let's get straight to the point. As he said that, he turned to stare at Koshi. The finance minister of your country is called One-Eyed, right? How do you know about One-Eyed? Koshi's eyes revealed a look of shock. Mr. Buffett, you were sent by the gods to save me from danger. Seeing the other party's slightly adoring expression, Buggy tapped his fingers on the table. I came to ask you precisely because I didn't know. If you want me to help you, tell me about the one-eyed man. Okay, I'll tell you. Koshi nodded, exhaled, and said slowly, Diderot, the actual ruler of the one-eyed family, came to Santon City 9 years ago, and used various methods to climb up step by step, and finally after the death of the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, he took over smoothly and became the current Chancellor of the Exchequer. In the past 9 years, he has become my father's most trusted and capable minister. My father has entrusted him with handling all the affairs. In fact, he handles everything in an orderly manner, which is very reassuring. I originally thought that he was from heaven. A gift to our country, but one time later I found out that there is a drug called alpirosurgora in my father's food. This drug has a strong addictive effect, and people can't extricate themselves from it. Once unable to smoke, the addict will become crazy. The body tends to wither and age. My royal father has been controlled by Diderot with this drug. After step-by-step investigation, I found out that he secretly established a huge organization capable of subverting the country. The one-eyed family absorbed countless pirates. Not only that, but the entire Santon City's most outstanding performing arts company is actually in his hands. I can't imagine that there is such a behemoth hidden under the ground of our country. Buggy nodded slightly. Well, do you know what he wants to do? He was originally a pirate who came back from the sea area called the New World in the second half of the Great Voyage, and his purpose must be for that legend. Pirates of the New World. Buggy murmured, and then asked, what legend? The Spring of Immortality. This is a legend that has been passed down in our country for hundreds of years. People who drink the Spring of Immortality can maintain their beauty forever. Old people over 100 years old drink this spring water, and they can be with young and strong people in their 20s. However, this is just a story in a fairy tale book, and in the final analysis it is just a legend. As he spoke, Koshi's expression became serious, but Diderot believed in the existence of such legends. He secretly established the Pate Company, suppressed and annexed other performing arts companies with his own power, and thus grabbed countless fortunes from the people. The money earned is used to win the hearts of the pirates under him, and the other part is dedicated to my father to paralyze vigilance and gain trust. Until later, Diderot added this addictive herbal powder to his father's food, increased the dose day by day, and successfully controlled his father. He began to spend years of accumulated funds to recruit people to build Wanshu Pagoda, but Wangshuda has always been just a cover for him. His real purpose is to dig a 50-meter deep pit there. If it is hollowed out, the overall structure of this island will definitely be destroyed, and the water and soil will be lost. Desolation, even more serious consequences. Mr. Buffett, although I don't know why you want Diderot's information, I have already told you everything I know, please help me, Koshi said sincerely. So it's like this. Your information is very useful to me. Buggy slowly digested the information that Koshi revealed, and then, under the latter's puzzled gaze, he compared the empty bowls and spoons on the table to each other. Stack up bit by bit. At this moment, a few men with black turbans tied on their heads came into the restaurant. They first cursed in the restaurant for a while, then molested a few female diners, and then lifted a wooden table and smashed it on the ground. Many people got up and left in fright. The owner of the restaurant tremblingly took out a small bag of Baileys and handed it to those people, hoping to persuade the plague gods away. But the eyes of these people looked this way, and they said a few words of beating and scolding each other, with a playful smile in their eyes, and walked over. "Mr. Buffett, they are members of the one-eyed family, we'd better go far away first." Kashi watched several people approaching, and pulled Bucky's sleeve, who continued to pile up empty bowls. Kashi knew that this group of people, it's not a day or two to find him trouble, and entanglement with them will only make his situation more troublesome. Bucky didn't care, and pushed down the piled up empty bowls and plates with both hands. "You ask me how to help you, my answer is rotten things. There is no need to do extra means, just push them away enough." Crackling. The plates shattered to the ground. Koshi showed a shocked gaze, and slowly opened his mouth wide. He didn't know if what he saw was what the other party wanted to express, but from this moment on, an unprecedented idea came to his heart that terrified him. A few members of the one-eyed family continued to walk over without knowing what to say. "Oh, isn't this Prince Kashi? Aren't you standing guard? Why are you so cool here?" "Yeah, if the king finds out, it's not as simple as standing guard, but exile, haha." As soon as the words fell, the few people didn't know what happened. A huge force came from behind their heads, and they were all pressed heavily to the ground with their bodies, breaking the hard stone slab and embedded in it. Then, one of the people's head was pulled from the stone slab. Blood was flowing from the forehead. He almost rolled his eyes, his head was dizzy, and he stammered with all his strength. "You bastard, what good did you do? Our boss will not let you go, you will regret what you did today." Bucky pulled the opponent's hair back. "Who is your boss?" The man spat the mixture of saliva and blood on the ground, with a grim face. "Don't expect me to tell you about this bastard." "Oh." Bucky didn't care, and directly lashed out at the man with his hands. Every punch would cause a scream of pain. Even the owner of the store covered his ears tremblingly, curled up under the counter. Seeing that the man was breathing in but not out, Bucky threw the other person on the ground like throwing garbage, and looked back at Koshi. "Sometimes the most effective way is to punch. If you don't believe me, look." He picked up another person who was struggling to poke his head out of the stone slab. "Who is your boss?" This person also heard the painful screams of his accomplices just now, and replied tremblingly, "Our boss is Ki Luo. If you see it, fists are the last word." Bucky looked at Cozy. "So this Chela is from the one-eyed family?" Shi was shocked by Bucky's methods, shook his head, and said, "It's just a peripheral staff who pretends to be a tiger." It turned out to be just a small character. Bucky left the man, wiped the blood splattered on his body, and asked Koshi, "Forget it, where Diderot lives, I'd better go directly to find him." The center of Gallo is the palace, and Diderot's residence is just south of the palace. Bucky narrowed his eyes slightly. With a gleam in his eyes, he waved his hand, got up and left outside the store. "Thank you, it's really a good deal. I have learned so much useful information in such a short period of time." Shi looked at Bucky's leaving back, and then slowly looked at the mess in the restaurant after he disappeared. He seemed to understand many things, and murmured in a low voice, "All rotten things should be pulled down. Is that right?" Bucky didn't know that his unintentional words would even completely change the country in the future, but this was no longer what he could predict now. As soon as he left the restaurant, the phone bug on his body rang. Pod 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 pod. After connecting to the phone bug, the voice seemed to have been heard somewhere, until the phone bug imitated the action of the other party sticking out his tongue and licking the corner of his mouth. Bucky vaguely remembered the man in black at the Xe Navison Hotel that night. It also seems to have done this action. "It's Bucky the Clown. Hello. This is the second time we've met." "The second time? Does this count as one?" Bucky said as if no one was around while walking with the phone bug in his hand. The phone bug didn't make any unnecessary answers, and said straight to the point, "What do you want? Please make a condition." Bucky frowned, remained silent for a while, and said to the phone bug, "Send my crew to me safely and well, and I may reconsider my next move." "Change the conditions. If that's the case, then there's nothing to talk about." Bucky hangs up the phone directly, thinking, while walking towards the center of the capital. Looking up, the super large video screen projected by the phone bug in midair is showing. This kind of projection screen can be seen everywhere in Jalo. At this time, inside the screen is a host with a red knot on his neckline and a black suit, talking freely. "Welcome to the latest newcomer show. The insightful words of the famous Miss Universe Maria just now really opened my eyes. This high-spirited talk will remain famous even in the history of show business." The host was polite for a while, and finally got to the point. "The next one is Kia Sang. who is strongly recommended by the super popular idol King Lilina. This is the first time Miss Lilina has selected a rookie in the past 10 years. Let us wait and see whether Miss will stand out among the many new stars. The idol King Lilina and Kya. Buggy raised his head solemnly and looked back in a certain direction. Another street in the royal capital of Gallo. Mikkel, Shuma, Kabaji and Moki were all stunned in place, looking at the projection screen supported in midair by brackets. Just as the host finished saying, "Wait and see," the screen flickered and the signal was switched to another screen. Kia is wearing a white and flawless dress decorated with thousands of pear blossoms. The hem of the clothes is carved with delicate lace borders. On her forehead is a wreath made of various colorful flowers. Her short light yellow hair falls down from her temples. She exudes a beautiful temperament from the inside out, but her eyes look very dull. Mikkel pointed at the screen. "Why is the lemon there?" Kabaji looked carefully. "Did you find something wrong with her eyes?" Shuma. "It seems a little listless, and the eyes are a little broken." Moki. "Why did Miss Shipdoctor have something to do with that Lilina again? It seems that Captain Buggy asked us to divide the army into 2 groups. It is the right time to come to Pate Company." The few people just looked at each other, and the picture on the screen was cut, and the host's voice sounded again. "Next is Miss Tina, who is recommended by powerful actors Mermaid Warrior and Penguin Boy." The projection screen flashed, and a pink-haired woman appeared, wearing a dark red luxurious coat, with a black bottoming shirt and black silk skirt inside, showing her sexy figure and mature aura. "Wait. Have we seen this woman before?" Mochi kept staring at the screen, and was the first to speak out at this moment. "It's the Navy. Why is she here?" Everyone looked up at the screen in doubt. At this moment, the situation on the screen developed again beyond everyone's expectations. I saw Tina took out a lady's thin cigarette from her body and held it in her mouth, and walked forward without saying a word, knocking out all the staff on the side. The white phone bug used to prevent signal interference was placed next to the projection phone bug, and then he said seriously to the big screen. "I am the Colonel of the Navy headquarters, Tina. Listen up, all the people of Santander. Tina now has sufficient evidence to prove that Diderot, the Chancellor of Santander, is the original pirate who offered a bounty of 76 million. Kella, whose evil deeds include selling the crazy drug called Alpiro Silgora and covering countless evil pirates, established a huge evil organization One-Eyed Family. Now, Tina swears in the name of the Navy that she will definitely catch live with this heinous pirate. All the irrelevant personnel in Jaluo, please don't wander in the streets, otherwise they will all be regarded as the pirate's accomplices." After finishing speaking, all of Gallo's projection screens went black, probably cut off by officials. Looking at the crowd fleeing in panic, Kabaji and the others showed serious expressions on their faces, and Mikkel said nervously, "The Navy is here too. Let's go to Pater Company as soon as possible, don't delay." Everyone nodded, and ran towards the location of Pater's company without delay. On the top of a small hill outside the city of Jalo, the capital of Santa City, hundreds of elite naval teams were assembled. The middle-aged man in smart clothes and a navy cloak listened to the information from the phone bug, and Jiju looked towards the direction of the capital while holding the ground. "Colonel Tina is doing a good job. Next, I will see D, but in which direction will this big snake flee?" Another man wearing a night helmet, who looked like a ghost crawling out of a tomb, clenched the sword around his waist. "Lieutenant General Jonathan, I have heard that you are very intelligent. You are so attractive. The eye-catching team has not been discovered by the enemy since this journey. This method is simply too admirable. It was just a small plan before, and the real show will be next." Jonathan did not show a complacent expression on his face, or his expression was always calm. "Santan City does not belong to the jurisdiction of the G-8 branch, but since I am passing through here, I am naturally obliged to cooperate with Colonel Tina's actions to capture the pirates, but I will let you worry about it, Mr. Peng En, who is on the boat." Although Peng En's face looks even more terrifying, he is actually a navy full of justice. He is very friendly to the common people and his subordinates, and is deeply loved by his subordinates. Hearing what Jonathan said at this time, he said with a serious face, "If this criminal organization that harbors filth cannot be dealt with today, then more innocent people will be victimized by it tomorrow. Pulling out this cancerous tumor hidden in Santander is exactly what our navy should do." Jonathan nodded approvingly to Peng En, as expected of ship chopper T. Peng En. "Your belief will one day blossom all over the world." "Thank you, Lieutenant General Jonathan," Jonathan said firmly. "Although this operation will bring huge trauma to the entire Santander city and will implicate many people, the short-term painful trauma can bring more long-term peace, as well as tenacity, vigorous vitality, Even if it makes me face the risk of persecuting innocent people and being demoted, I will not hesitate. When he was passing through Santon City, he happened to see the warship Tina left at the port and the soldiers on standby. Afterwards, the two communicated with each other on the phone, and he quickly learned the reason and information of the incident. So Tina made a detailed plan. Now that Tina's scaring the snake has succeeded, the next thing is to lure the snake out of the hole, and then wipe out the evil. Mr. Peng En, you will lead the arrest operation, and I will lead the overall situation. Jonathan gave the order, looked at Peng En wisely, and patted him on the shoulder. After this incident is successful, I will go to marry Colonel Tina for you. Your age is very suitable, and you are colleagues. She will also look at you with admiration after this battle. The probability of success will be about 90.00%. You have to grasp it carefully. Colonel Tina. Peng En's zombie-like face turned to the side unnaturally. When he turned around, his face was reddish. He straightened his back and gave a military salute. Yes, Lieutenant General Jonathan. Then, quickly took a Navy team away. The pirates who retreated from the New World 10 years ago should not be underestimated. Jonathan nodded and looked in the direction of the capital, and then said to the messenger soldier next to him, once there is news of Dikaluo's escape direction, immediately tell me. As long as he is led out of Jalo, he will definitely be caught. The capital of the king, Gala, the residence of the Minister of Finance, and the study. Diderot connected the phone bug on the table. Joker. I didn't expect you to take the initiative to contact me. Furofurfur. A sinister laugh came from the phone bug. No, I just want to tell you that our transaction should be terminated. Diderot frowned. Why? If you think my tribute is not enough, I can increase your tribute by 10% every year. That's not a problem. It's not about the money. You've been targeted by the Navy. It seems that after being kicked out of the New World, your life has become much more comfortable, and your mind has become unbelievably stupid. Furfur. Just how about this? The phone bug directly tore his face, and hung up arrogantly without leaving any room. Damn it. Diderot hammered the desk heavily angrily, and the desk split in two, and various documents flew everywhere. Captain. Benson behind him stretched out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. How dare this bastard, Doflamingo, dare to talk to you like that? When you were in the New World, he was just a lowly pirate. Now that he is a running dog of the world government, he is so arrogant. Diderot said with a gloomy face, although Joker is annoying, his eyeliner is all over the world. This may not have given me a reminder. I thought that the naval projection incident just now could be suppressed, but it seems it doesn't seem so simple. That bastard mermaid, is his mind full of muddle-headedness? He actually brought the Navy into Pate's company. If I hadn't been focusing on Wangshuta these days, how could it be there is such a big mistake? Benson asked, Captain, what should we do next? You go to inform all the vertical eyes in the family and order them to create chaos in the entire capital. You go to the shipyard to drive out our pirate ships. It's time to leave this dross land and return to the New World. Where's Bucky the clown? Leave him alone. He can make as much trouble as he likes here. It has nothing to do with us. Even if the country falls into panic and perishes, it has nothing to do with me. I will get what I want right away, immediately. I will return to my youth and return to the New World to kill that hateful man. Diderot laughed maniacally, as if he wanted to vent all the resentment accumulated in his heart for nearly 10 years. Bucky ran to the south of the center of the capital. People on the road fled in panic, hid in the shadows of the corners, or closed the doors and windows tightly. Then countless people appeared on the street. It seemed that there were three groups of people. One group was the Navy, another group is the Royal City Guard, and another group is supposed to be the One-Eyed Family. The three parties don't know whose details, and they fight in a mess, and the sound of fighting resounds throughout the capital. It's very similar to the situation in Rogue Town, but this time Bucky is also in this chess game, not the chess player. Bucky first went around to the palace, then headed south, and finally saw a very luxurious mansion surrounded by many people. He directly climbed over the 2-meter-high fence and landed on the lawn in the yard. Who are you? Dare to trespass on Lord Diderot's mansion? Several sharp-eyed bodyguards in black immediately raised their guns and surrounded Bucky. Diderot, you were right. Bucky murmured to himself, directly shaved, dodged behind several people, and then severely injured several people with his finger gun. He controlled his strength very well, and several people lost their fighting power, but they did not die. The strength to breathe. Bucky grabbed the head of one person. Where is Diderot? This bodyguard is not a tough guy either. After being seriously injured, he lost his confidence and begged for mercy. I don't know, let me go. Seeing that he couldn't find anything out of it, Bucky directly left the man and walked inside. There are two conjoined buildings in the middle of this kind of mansion. One is tall and the other is short, which looks like two eyes of different sizes from the outside. In the process of walking towards this building, countless guards with pistols rushed over, but they could only slightly resist Bucky's footsteps. After a while, these dozens of people all fell to the ground and lost consciousness. Bucky pushed open the door of the house, and the decoration inside is very luxurious, especially the few arty oil paintings on the east wall, all of which prove that the identity of the owner is different. But at this time Bucky didn't pay much attention to the surrounding decorations, and quickly searched the rooms on the first floor, but only found a few shivering maids curled up in the corner. Bucky pretended to be vicious and asked, "Where is Diderot?" These maids had long been frightened by the gunshots outside and the sound of fighting, and their tongues were a little unclear at this moment. "No. I don't know." After getting the same answer, Bucky quickly walked up to the second floor without spending too much time on them. There are only 4 rooms on the second floor, and there are only 4 rooms. After searching, there is no sign of Diderot. "Have you been run away by this guy?" Bucky originally planned to divide into 2 teams. Mikkel and his team went to Pet Company to search for Kia's traces, and his own team directly looked for opportunities to capture the king. The largest performing arts company in the world has found Kia, but it is still the most efficient to catch Diderot and force her to release him by himself. However, at present, the action here seems to have failed. Pod, the voice of the phone bug rang again. Bucky picks up the phone bug. Who will it be this time? A voice came from the other end of the phone bug. "Bucky, it's me, Alex." "Oh, it's you." Bucky's tone was relatively calm, without too much disturbance, as if he had expected it. Alex's voice sounded very solemn. "I think this island is about to be destroyed." With a thought, Bucky asked, "What's going on?" "At Wanshu Pagoda, the one-eyed man wants to dig down the entire island. His movements are very fast, and the foundation of the island will be hollowed out immediately. At that time, the entire island will sink into the sea, and everyone on the island will be buried at the bottom of the sea." Hearing Alex's words, Bucky couldn't help jumping in his heart. What is his purpose? "I don't know, but he is definitely doing a very dangerous thing. If you can't stop him, no one can escape the fate of death. I'm already on the way to Wanshu Pagoda. Let's cooperate with me. Let's work together. If you do, you will definitely be able to stop One-Eye's plot." "How did you know about this?" "I have my own information. This matter is by no means trivial. It's too late to explain it. Come here quickly." "Okay, I get it." Following Bucky's words, the other party hung up the phone. Bucky rolled his eyes, jumped off the windowsill, landed on the lawn, then walked out quickly, and just walked out of the gate of the mansion, he collided with someone. The man took a few steps back, bowed his head and apologized bluntly, with a sincere tone. "Excuse me, are you injured?" "It's okay. Be more careful next time." Bucky replied subconsciously when he was hit. Only then did he realize that the other party's strength was quite strong. The naval soldiers who followed drew out their weapons vigilantly. "Master Peng En. This person is the pirate Bucky with a bounty of 48 million. "Pirate?" Peng En came to his senses, immediately drew his knife at Bucky, and shouted coldly, "You are a pirate. Put down your weapon and capture him." "Do you recognize this?" Bucky was slightly surprised by the sea soldier's astonishing eyes. Although he took off his glasses, he was still wearing a fake beard, which was quite different from the one on the bounty list. He could recognize it at a glance, and it turned out to be a problem with his nose. Bar. And the Peng En in front of him is actually a captain, and it seems to have appeared in the original book, although Bucky doesn't remember much, but it means. Bucky turned backwards and quickly backed away more than 10 meters away, avoiding Peng En's drawn sword. Who knows if the other party will be domineering. Right-angle flying bird. Pen big bird. A light blue right-angled sword chi swung out from the sword held in Peng En's hand. His sword aura is very strange. It swirls in a square shape, and every time the sword aura makes a circle in the air, the speed will continue to increase. Lanjiao. Cross moon. Bucky quickly kicked out 2 white slashing airflows in both directions horizontally and vertically. His feet can be separated, so he quickly slashed in different directions to expand the striking area. The 2 different slashes collided with each other, making a violent thunderclap, and violent smoke rose in the air. Before the smoke cleared, Peng En rushed over with his sword raised. Right angle. Hexagonal diamond cut. He raised the knife as if drawing a regular hexagonal shape in the air, but in fact, the movement he swung was to block all the directions that Bucky could shoot, thus forming a suppression. But Bucky's reaction and speed were faster than Peng En imagined. He casually pulled out the 10 hands behind his back, blocked in front of him, and stabbed purposefully to the right, just to slow down. The rhythm then followed the trajectory of Peng En's sword swing and in turn restrained the opponent's movements. "Have you been seen through?" Peng En was shocked. His movements were square, and he swung out very regularly. As long as the first move suppressed the opponent, the rhythm of the opponent could be suppressed later, but if the first move was defeated, the next all movements will be destroyed in an infinite vicious circle, which belongs to the sword move of not advancing or retreating. Suddenly, he could only end up in the position of parrying and resisting. Since Peng En was able to unleash slashes out of thin air, it meant that he was not weak, but his sword moves were too regular and lacked technical changes. However, this regular movement has now become his biggest weakness. Buggy found a gap, moved his 10 hands along Peng En's long knife, and flipped his wrist out. Immediately, Peng En's arm felt a strong force coming from the blade, and he involuntarily lifted it upwards. The door is wide open. Low-frequency finger gun. Buggy stabbed Peng En's unsuspecting chest with his left hand tremblingly. It looked like the trembling hand of an old man picking up food with chopsticks, his right chest. Peng En suddenly spat out a big mouthful of blood, and his body flew upside down like a cannonball for tens of meters, smashing the tall shop behind him to pieces in an instant, filled with smoke and dust, and the rubble on the wall rolled down, burying it in the ground, among the ruins. Ordinary finger guns cannot cause this kind of power, but after integrating Buggy's devil fruit ability, life return and new methods derived from finger guns, the power is naturally different. But after using this move, his breathing became a lot faster. Although this method is not perfect, the hasty move will consume more energy. A group of soldiers brought by Peng En saw the officer's appearance. Some of the personnel standing behind hurried over to help, and the other part of the navy, with their eyes open, picked up their guns and burst out violent flames. Bang bang bang, keep shooting at Buggy. You nasty pirate, you hurt our beloved Colonel Peng En like this. Fuck you. Buggy the clown. Buggy's body was punched into dense holes in an instant. He was not afraid of bullets, but when the bullets shot over, the airflow driven by the bullets scattered his body backwards in advance and turned into minced meat, thus avoiding the impact of the bullets. And the force receiving surface, but if the group of sea soldiers shoot too intensively and frequently, his body will still be injured. He narrowed his eyes slightly, bent his knees, and instantly released a pale white slashing airflow, and greeted the group of soldiers. A few soldiers held guns in their hands, only knowing to launch an offensive blindly, and only slowed down their movements in horror and astonishment when the slashing airflow flew in front of them. Right angle. Pen's triangle defense. Peng En quickly swept over from the ruins of the shop, and the long knife in his hand danced quickly, forming a triangle, pushing aside a few naval soldiers who were about to be injured, and blocking the front of the slashing airflow. Poochie. His triangle defense didn't block it, or he didn't have any extra strength to parry. This slashing airflow directly knocked the long knife in his hand into the air, and the momentum remained undiminished, pushing his body back several times. Meters, a line of blood spurted out from his chest. Buggy looked at the blood bubbling from Peng En's right chest and a long and narrow shallow cut between the chest and abdomen, and said expressionlessly, "After taking the trick I just did, your body will be damaged. The viscera in the house are about to be dislocated, and I still have the strength to stand up again. But why do you have to do such a meaningless stubborn resistance? Just pretend to be dead, and it will save me the trouble of killing you." Peng En was covered in blood, and his throat throbbed. He looked straight at Buggy, who looked like a daunting mountain in front of him. He opened his mouth, revealing a row of uneven teeth with one missing, and said with great difficulty, "I bear the expectations and beliefs of these soldiers on my shoulders. If I fall here, how will I protect the group of subordinates behind me, and how will I face the lieutenant general who entrusted these soldiers to me? What will happen to this country? How many innocent people died under the butcher knife of the rebels? Even in this unjust world, I want to prove that there is still justice and justice in this place. Even if my hands and feet will be broken, innocent and kind the people's tomorrow, I will protect it no matter what." After finishing speaking, he suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. It seemed that because of the severe pain in his body, his zombie-like face was almost distorted, and the blood that was covered in his chest flowed even more violently. Master Peng En. All the soldiers around stopped shooting at Buggy, tears streaming down their faces, and their words choked up. Even with different positions, Buggy cannot refute or deny these words. There are officers in the Navy who commit crimes under the banner of justice, but there are also many kind and just people like Pen, and kindness and justice are a bottom line. Different positions, Buggy, who is a pirate, had to be touched by Pen's words. He lowered his eyes slightly, turned and left. "If you try to stop me, I will kill all the Navy here including you. If you are thinking about the lives of your soldiers and the life and death of this country, you'd better think about it. Your actions. Peng En gritted his teeth tightly, tears mixed with blood, watched Bucky's back gradually becoming smaller, forced himself to turn his head not to look at Bucky's figure, finally made a decision, and sighed in pain. There's nothing I can do about him. Pirates, mercenaries, and royal city guards belonging to the one-eyed family fought in chaos on the streets. The smoke filled the air, and the sound of fighting was everywhere. Compared with strict discipline, the well-commanded Navy had the upper hand and tried to cooperate with the royal city guards. Let's fight against the one-eyed family together, but the attitude of the Wangcheng guards is very strange. Both the Navy and the one-eyed family have become the targets of their cannons and weapons. The chaos of the three parties continued to spread and invade the entire capital. Who would have imagined that in the morning, Jia Luo, who was indifferent to the world, turned into a hell on earth full of killing and blood in just half a day. At the same time, Kabaji and others, in this uneasy environment, accelerated their pace towards Pet Company, knocking down dozens of one-eyed family members who blocked their progress along the way, and some of them belonged to the more difficult Black Eyes. In fact, it has only been 10 minutes since Tina's speech was released, and the Pate Company located north of Jialo is already close at hand. If nothing unexpected, Kia should still be inside. Everyone was about to enter the area where Pater's company was located, when a figure suddenly emerged from the shadow of a bungalow and shouted to everyone, "Wait a minute." Kabaji looked at the man in white with a cigarette stick in front of him. "Alex, it's you." "It's me." Alex looked at the crowd anxiously at this moment. "This island is about to be destroyed by Cyclops. Come with me to Wanshu Pagoda. Cyclops is there, and Bucky has also passed by. If we don't work together to stop One-Eye's conspiracy, no one can survive here, and tens of millions of innocent people on this island will also be implicated and buried in the sea." Kabaji stood up, turned around and said to everyone, "Go and rescue Kaya, Alex and I will go there." Moki, Shuma and Mikkel nodded tacitly, and left quickly without saying much, leaving Kabaji alone. "Just you." Alex showed a trace of worry on his face. Kabaji said, "They are going to rescue our most important partner, and if Captain Bucky is there, he can deal with any enemy without me." "Alright. Then let's go to Wanshu Pagoda to support Bucky." Alex was unwilling to say more useless words at this time, and took Kabaji to take a shortcut and walk towards Wanshu Pagoda. Just rounding a corner, a sharp sword pierced Alex's back. Alex quickly swung his cigarette stick to block the sudden sword, turned around and looked at Kabaji with a gloomy face, frowning. "Kabaji, what are you doing?" Kabaji put Sakura Fubuki in front of him. "Captain Bucky asked me to give you a word. This werewolf killing is over." Alex asked puzzledly, "What do you mean?" "I don't know what Captain Bucky means." Kabaji snorted coldly. "However, you don't have to pretend anymore, you must have participated in this scene from the very beginning." Alex's face gradually calmed down, and he smiled softly. His original voice was very clear, but the countless hideous scars on his face didn't match his laughter at this moment. "Have you been discovered? I'm obviously already like this entering the play. The performance is also flawless. I put all my emotions into it. Even in Lenan, I desperately defended Bucky against the Navy. How did you see through such excellent acting skills? Where did you start? Doubt me. You can really laugh." Kabaji's face was a little cold. "I have been suspicious of you since the very beginning in Shanivasan, but Captain Bucky has never known the purpose of what you did and what you did. Only when they fall will they stand still. Why? It shouldn't be seen through in Xanavasan." Alex thought hard for a while, then put the cigarette holder in his mouth and took a puff, and slowly exhaled. "It's like talking to someone you haven't seen in years." Smell. The strange smell of smoke can't fool people. Shuma is not an ordinary person. The smell of smoke on your body is exactly the same as that of the swordsman who blocked Shuma and let the jackal escape. Only this point can be used to kill the wolves. You are defined as outside the circle, so the precautions against you have been sufficient from the beginning. So that's the case, haha. Alex shook his head. "I killed all those people in the Xanavasan hotel, and let the jackal Endy take the initiative to provoke in the name of the one-eyed family, and then everything they all planted the blame on the one-eyed family, provided you with the location you were going to go to through the phone bug, and lured you to Jalo. I didn't expect that the current situation is very different from my expectation. This is the truth of the matter, but," Kabaji said with gloomy eyes, "did you take Kia away?" "No, your ship doctor really has nothing to do with me. She was taken away by another guy from the one-eyed family, and I just took advantage of this." Alex's tone has always been very slow, and he couldn't get up now. "I wasn't in a hurry at first, but things have changed. The fountain of immortality may be born at any time. In order to get this kind of thing, I must find some powerful ones that can attack one-eyed. The pawns came to consume his strength, and you who happen to appear are really suitable to play this role, but unfortunately, my layout fell short, and it seems that I was beaten. Kabaji responded coldly. If you want to treat others as fools, you must have the consciousness of being played. It's true that I haven't moved my muscles and bones for too long, and even my brain is a little slow. Alex put the cigarette rod flat on his chest, and pushed his hands to the sides, and the cigarette rod slowly appeared. There was an opening, and then the tobacco rod was pushed away, and a pitch-black rapier more than 1 meter long emerged from it, and Alex held it in his hand. I'd better deal with you quickly, and then go to Wanwan. Shoota. Kill one-eyed. The spring of immortality should belong to me. Kabaji held the sword in front of him. That's right, I should get rid of you quickly, and then meet with Captain Buggy. You can use and provoke others, but it's a pity that you found the wrong one this time. Object. You don't know who you shouldn't mess with. It's so ridiculous. Alex drew his sword and rushed over with a grim expression. It's just a little pirate who just stepped into the Great Root. What right do you have to say such big words? I'll prove it to you. The power cultivated day and night by the pirate who has just stepped into the Great Root. Kabaji's hand turned Sakura Fubuki, and it suddenly turned into 6 petal-like blades that were connected together, sprinting forward, flower of 6 thorns. Ja Luo, on the street hundreds of meters in front of Pate Company, many people with black vertical eyes pierced on their wrists and people in knight armor rushed to fight, and immediately scattered Mikkel and his party, and then turned back at that time. Shuma was nowhere to be found. Mochi and Mikkel looked at each other helplessly, so they had to go to Pate Company to rescue Kia first, and then meet Shuma later. At this time, Shuma jumped onto the eaves or balconies of the houses, walked around a few alleys, and followed a man in a black robe who wrapped his body tightly. Finally, the man in front stopped. Come out, boy. What's the purpose of following me in hiding for so long? Hey, how do you know I'm here? Shuma jumped down from the eaves. I remember seeing you. The seasoning on your body smells like pepper and grapes. The nose is really good. Benson habitually stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. I really like to dip the grapes in chili and enjoy them. But what are you doing with me? Shuma asked. Did you take the kaya ingredients away? Oh. You are here to find the crew on your ship. It is indeed in our hands, but not mine. So it's in your hands. Hurry up and hand over the Kia ingredients. Shuma took out the raptor boomerang that he carried with him. You admit it, so don't deny it. You kid, don't you understand what I mean? I said it's in our hands, but it's not in my hands. Yes, it's in your hands. It turned out to be a fool. I licked the corner of my mouth. Then there is no other way. I'd better get rid of you, and then go to the shipyard to pick up the ship. He took off the obstructing robe, exposing his blonde hair and facial features to the sun. His eyes and nose are very attractive. His lips look a little thin. It doesn't matter. The key is that his teeth are very strange. 2 front teeth. It is 1 centimeter longer than the lower lip, and there are 2 long and large spoons and forks pinned to the waist. Shuma looked at the opponent's teeth. Hey. You are the food for rabbits. Rabbit. When Benson heard this word, his eyes turned red. His 2 front teeth opened and closed while speaking. You bastard. How dare you say it? He picked up the fork in his left hand and the spoon in his right, and said with a sullen face, I'm going to make you into a real food. Ingredients. Are you referring to me? Shuma pointed at himself indifferently. Yes, I am Shuma's ingredients. It's a mess. Benson stepped on his feet, and raised the spoon and fork in his hand. Let you know how good I am. Stir-fried oranges with green vegetables. He raised his fork and slashed down from the sky, holding the spoon in his other hand horizontally in front of his chest, and he was close in the blink of an eye. Shuma wanted to dodge to the right, but Benson seemed to see through his movements. The spoon in Benson's right hand seemed to have been waiting for the moment Shuma dodged, and swung it out instantly, hitting Shuma's right abdomen directly. The splitting fork changed direction in an instant, piercing Shuma's chest, and shouted, Peach crisp pork ribs. Shuma was hit on the right side of the abdomen, and he felt extremely painful. This kind of pain was a pain he had never experienced since leaving the island. On the one hand, the opponent's strength was quite strong. Fragility seemed to understand it very well, but after being hit for a while, his body felt numb. Shu Ma let out a muffled grunt. Although it was painful, he didn't act in a panic. He knew that once the other party's fork pierced his chest, his situation would definitely become more dangerous. But in the blink of an eye, he held the fork in his hand. The bird of prey boomerang immediately blocked it in front of the chest, parrying the fork, and then twisted. The boomerang wrapped around the fork, bringing the 3 sharp thorns of the fork in a downward direction, and then the other hand rushed towards Benson's face off. Seeing that this punch was about to knock Benson into the air, but his head was barely deflected, and he dodged Shu Ma's punch for a moment. It looked very dangerous, but Benson didn't show his face. There was a trace of panic, as if it had been expected a long time ago. Sweet dumplings. With a low moan, the spoon in his hand quickly moved away again, wanting to hit the same spot on Shuma's right abdomen again. Shuma turned the boomerang around Benson's fork in his hand, held it with his backhand, stepped back quickly, and disappeared in place in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already about 10 meters away from Benson. The shave that Shuma could use was different from the normal shave that he used to sprint forward. When you distance yourself from your opponent, you don't have to worry about the weakness behind your back being exposed. Even Buggy can't imagine how Shuma developed this kind of reversal, let alone do it. Only then did Shu Ma touch the bruise on his right abdomen, and took a breath. It hurts so much. Benson flicked the spoon in his hand, stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. You can feel lucky that you can eat me without falling, even if I have been away from the New World for 10 years. And I have long forgotten how to fight, but if you think that you can underestimate me, then the cooking master, Benson, will make you feel that life is worse than death, just as terrible as a watermelon that does not put cumin. Do you want to put cumin in the watermelon? Shuma heard Benson's words, temporarily forgot to think about the pain, and blinked his eyes several times before shouting, "You bastard! The ingredients are less deceptive. How can watermelon be put in cumin? You heretic!" What? Heresy? Benson's face was full of anger. How dare you deny my cooking philosophy? You don't know how delicious watermelon can be with cumin, and you certainly don't know how lychees are dipped in soy sauce sour. An ignorant junior like you, who only knows how to irresponsibly scold others for their food experience. I will kill every one of these bastards. After all, he sprinted again with a spoon and fork in his hand. I won't fight with you stupidly, Bucky said. I'm long range, as long as it's like flying a kite. Huma stepped on the moon steps, jumped into the air in the blink of an eye, stretched out his index finger and rotated the boomerang in his hand. His thumb and middle finger cut into the boomerang at a strange angle, and suddenly used a specific gesture to shoot the boomerang towards Benson. Suddenly, the boomerang flew out like a silver moonblade. The speed of the silver moonblade was very fast, but Benson was unhurried, as before. He had predicted the shooting trajectory of the raptor boomerang. With his feet on both sides, the lights on the wall staggered, and when the boomerang was a few centimeters away from his chest, he quickened his pace, jumped up, rushed to the eaves, and avoided the silver moon. The silver moon blade slashed across the wall, cutting a smooth opening in the masonry wall, then whirled in the air, and returned to Shu Ma's hand. It's useless. Benson stood on the eaves. Although my experience is just getting started, it's still enough to deal with you. It turns out that this is what Uncle Jabba said about the domineering arrogance. Shuma stretched out his finger and rubbed it under his nose, but I don't believe that you can dodge it, just accept the trick. As Shuma distanced himself from Benson, he kept flying the boomerang in his hand. Each time, the boomerang would quickly shoot towards Benson, and then fly back precisely in the direction Shuma was moving, returning to his hand. Superior. Although Benson can keep dodging Shuma's attack with his knowledge, and at the same time keep approaching Shuma on the eaves, but Shuma's movements are very flexible. He just shoots a boomerang from a distance. Once Benson gets too close, he immediately shoots, stepping up on moon steps and rushing upwards, waiting to gain some distance, and then walking at a low altitude. Benson felt a little helpless. The battle suddenly became very anxious. At the same time, within Pater's company, there is a floor dedicated to top members with an area of 100 square meters. Lilina helped Kia, who looked a little delirious, and her eyes fell on the mermaid warrior and penguin boy who were fighting with Tina. I said, "How did you two idiots bring the navy to Pater? You are pigs." Mermaid warrior and penguin boy worked together and were able to suppress Tina. At this time, mermaid warrior still had the strength to respond. We are also thinking about the company. This woman's natural temperament is simply perfect. If she can join our company, then the strength of our company will naturally rise to a higher level. This kind of intuitive benefits and reputation cannot be ignored by us as a part of the company. The penguin boy said, "Soldier, don't talk about it. We did it too hastily, so that it affected the whole company. Two stupid pigs that only add to the chaos. You can't even take down this old woman." Diderot also said, "Let's get out of here immediately and go to the shipyard." I don't want it. Why should I be some kind of pirate with you bastards? I want to stay here and be my heavenly king, so that my life cannot be disrupted by you and the nasty navy. Kill her quickly. Lilina scolded the two of them in a coquettish voice. Tina tried her best to resist the continuous combo attack of Mermaid Warrior and Penguin Boy. She was secretly surprised. She never thought that these two well-known artist groups in Santander were also the cadres of the One-Eyed family, and according to their strength, I'm afraid it is the highest level red vertical eye in the One-Eyed family. Not only that, Lilina, the idol who can reprimand the two, seems to be a cadre of the One-Eyed family. How far has this One-Eyed family reached out and how many people have they absorbed? It's just that she was a little overwhelmed by the offensive of the two at this time, and she didn't have the energy to speak. Even with the cooperation of her own devil fruit ability and domineering, she still fell into a disadvantage under the seamless cooperation of the two. This is the power of the red vertical eye at the upper level of the pyramid in the One-Eyed family. Suddenly, an exclamation sounded from the side, Kia. When Mikkel and Mochi came to Pet Company, 100% of the receptionists, bodyguards and entertainers inside had already run away. That is to say, some people were hiding in the performance room and lounge, not daring to come out, because outside the company the occasional gunshots and fighting sounds could already come in through the windows. Even if they have acted as heroes who save the world, villains who do evil, or warriors who are not afraid of sacrifice, it is only a performance after all. Once they encounter a real situation, they are more afraid than anyone else at the moment. It was in this situation that Mikkel and Mochi searched the first to fourth floors but did not see Kia. It was not until they broke through the door at the stairway on the fifth floor and walked up that they found the signs of the fight and the disappearance. Long and elegant. It's you. Mikkel and Mochi were very shocked at this moment. Because Buggy kidnapped Lilina before, everyone spent a long time with her, but they were very impressed by her soft and weak character. When it came to Lilina's strong recommendation for Kia, the two of them still couldn't believe that this weak woman would have anything to do with Kia. Until now, seeing that Kia seemed to be held hostage by Lilina, they finally gave birth to seeing an unspeakable gap. He froze in place. It's you two despicable pirates. Lilina covered her mouth and chuckled. She began to cry while laughing, and then her crying covered her laughter, and she timidly choked up. It's me. You kidnapped Lemon. Mikkel finally came to his senses. Based on Lilina's current performance, her real character is not as innocent and harmless as she saw at first, but very bewitching and performative. Kidnapping? Lilina's tears stopped abruptly. She sniffed and giggled. Don't put it so harshly. I just want to invite her to become an outstanding artist and become the eye-catching actress on the screen. It's just an idol, isn't it good, to be loved by thousands of people? Even the king of a country can't do this. Then at that time, Mikkel did not follow Lilina's words, but asked again, it's not that someone rescued you, but you pretended to be rescued. There's no such thing as an old witch. Lilina supported Kaya, and did not intend to let go. You can put it this way, I just want to experience the helplessness and despair of being held hostage once in a while. Life is like a drama, and drama is like life. Isn't that so what? This kind of life will make me feel passion and joy. Mochi stepped forward and looked at Lilina with a frown. Stop talking nonsense, and return our companion quickly. What an irritable and stupid pirate. It's a pity that my addiction is not over yet, so I can't return it to you now. After Lilina finished speaking, she picked up Kia, who was blind-eyed, and jumped out of the window on the fifth floor in the blink of an eye. Mochi and Mikkel hurriedly chased after them and looked out the window. Lilina's figure in the air kept shrinking. She didn't jump directly from the fifth floor, which was more than 30 meters high, to the ground. An almost transparent and invisible string was connected to a support point on the outer wall, and it was manipulated by hand to move down continuously. The support point also changed continuously with her fall, and she was about to fall to the ground. Mikkel glanced at the not-so-complicated environment outside the window, and immediately climbed onto the windowsill. With her hands and feet attached to the wall, she ran quickly on the vertical wall. She was more like a cat than a cat at this moment. The swift gecko fell to the ground in the blink of an eye, and Lina, who was equally swift in her steps, disappeared downstairs in Pater's company one after the other. Mochi didn't think too much about it. Jumping on the windowsill, he didn't have so many worries, and his movements were very simple and rude. He jumped directly from the windowsill more than 30 meters high. His body continued to accelerate like a vertically falling rocket, and the white body on his body mow was blown upward by the bulging wind, and fell to the ground in just a few blinks, his knees bent and his hands propped on the ground. However, there were no breaks or cracks on the ground, just like a light feather falling down. Mochi didn't seem to be affected by the reaction force when he landed. He stood up calmly, and then quickly ran in the direction of Mikkel, but every time he took a step, the surroundings of his footprints were cracked like a spreading spider web. Open. Using his ability to store fruit, he instantly stored the falling impact within his body, and then released it outward bit by bit. Out of the corner of his eye, He saw both of them chasing after them. Mermaid Warrior and Penguin Boy punched Tina at the same time, forcing her to retreat. Then Mermaid Warrior said, "Penguin, Penguin, leave it to me, you go, let's protect Lisa. Those two pirates don't look like ordinary people. If they hurt Lisa, then we won't be able to explain it to the boss." Penguin Boy received it. "This Navy woman is handed over to you, soldier." Penguin Boy jumped out of the window after finishing speaking, as if he had already regarded this window as a safe passage. "You really don't take Tina too seriously." Tina suddenly raised her foot and kicked the Mermaid Warrior. Without the cooperation of the two of them, the pressure on her body was much lighter, and her movements were no longer restrained too much. This kick was 3 times faster than before. He directly kicked the Mermaid Warrior in the chest, who hadn't had time to return to defense, and kicked him flying a distance of more than 10 meters. The mermaid soldier touched the ground with his feet and drew a shallow mark on the ground before he finally stopped and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. As expected of the colonel of the Navy headquarters, this is really good power. An entertainer is an entertainer. He acts as a hero in the play, but in fact he is just a despicable villain who is blindly arrogant and works for tigers. Tina wants you all to be brought to justice. Whether it's a hero or acting. Everything I have is given by my boss. No matter how much I love this industry, it will not be greater than my loyalty to the boss. Even if I betray the wishes of the people, I will follow the boss until I die. No regrets. Stubborn guy. A formation of black guns. Tina snorted coldly, raised her foot, and instantly dozens of black guns shot towards the Mermaid Warrior in an orderly manner. Mermaid Warrior secrets. Playing around. The mermaid immediately stepped left and right as if swimming in the sea, and rushed towards Tina facing the gap in the middle of the black spear formation. Mochi's pace was slower than that of Mikkel and Lilina. He was chasing after him when suddenly a figure appeared beside him. The Penguin Boy slid on the ground with his round body as if he was swimming, and kept moving his hands towards him. Chianyu, however, with this speed, actually caught up with Mochi, not only succeeded in overtaking him but also stopped him. Mochi had no choice but to stop, looking at the strange Penguin Boy. "What the hell are you?" The Penguin Boy stood up. The fat on his fat body trembled, but he subconsciously replied with justice on his face, "Since you ask the question sincerely, I will answer you mercifully." After finishing speaking, there was a silence in the air. He looked around and realized that the Mermaid Warrior who cooperated with him to speak next was not there. "Stay out of the way, idiot penguin." Mochi was still a little stunned by the Penguin Boy for a moment. Without further ado, he sprinted over and kicked the latter's round cheek. The Penguin Boy's cheeks were almost distorted and gradually deformed, and then his body was blown away by this force, just like a bowling ball rolled all the way, crashing into 3 big trees along the way, and finally crashed into the distant place. In the huge projection screen that can be seen everywhere in Jalo. "What an idiot in the way." Mochi snorted and continued to chase forward. Just after running a few steps, a figure suddenly appeared from the collapsed part of the screen. Penguin Boy hit back and knocked the unprepared Mochi away. The latter smashed through the wall like a comet, and then shattered the house. Diffuse. The Penguin Boy stood there, wiped the blood on his cheeks, squatted down slightly, and stretched out his arms to the right. This is the usual action after defeating bad guys in the combination of mermaids and penguins. He shouted loudly, "Justice is here. You won't fail. The penguin is the brave and free seaboy." In the damaged house, the rubble was pushed away, and Mochi crawled out from the pile of stones, covered in dust. At the moment he was hit by the Penguin Boy, he used an iron block, but even so, the opponent's strong impact force still knocked him out, although he himself was not hurt by it. Mochi spit out the stone dust in his mouth a few times, wiped the dust on his face, looked at the Penguin Boy, and walked over. Master Mochi is always obstructed by those who pretend to be righteous. It is the tragic wind that belongs to heroes. The two talked to themselves, looked at each other, and then seemed to have a very tacit understanding, stretched out their fists and slammed each other's cheeks, shouting at each other without dodging. "I hate you for pretending and not listening to others well, bastard." The cheeks of the two sunken at the same time, and they backed away at the same time. Mikkel chased all the way for 4 streets, and finally caught up with Lilina, who was trying to get rid of her. Lilina didn't run along the way, but used her silk thread to wrap around a certain building, and directly pulled her body towards the building. That position, precisely because of this, made it impossible for the fast Mikkel to catch up in a short time. But after all, she still has Kia on her back, and she always pays attention to changes in the surrounding environment and changes the direction of the silk thread. Over time, the speed is not as good as it was at the beginning, and she can change the space and geographical location by mistake. and then was overtaken by Mikkel, who ran all the way and persevered. At this time, the two were confronting each other in the street. "Little cat. Why are you chasing me like this? Do you want to become an artist too? I have seen many fur people drifting over from the sea in the past years, and you are not the first one, but if your desire is really so strong, I can consider helping you." Lilina did not intend to take Kia, who was still a little unconscious, as a hostage, but leaned her body against the wall beside her, and said to Mikkel with a smile, "I don't want to do anything to you either. You'd better leave like this. If you have any evil intentions, I won't let you go." Mikkel watched Lilina put Kia on the ground, and heaved a sigh of relief. If the other party wanted to threaten Kia, it would be very difficult for her to deal with, but now it seems that the other party is not so bad yet. To the bone. "It's really a kitten who can't understand people's words, so I have to get rid of you here." Lilina's eyes suddenly became very scary, and her voice suddenly became gloomy. "Then soak you in medicine and make a mummified corpse." When Mikkel heard Lilina's words, his body trembled involuntarily. The tone of the other party really made people feel serious, but the latter immediately spread a cute smile. "Of course I lied to you, that's right, he." Mikkel let out a breath, his face became serious, and his two cat paws were slightly bent in front of him. "Since it doesn't make sense, I can only beat you. Down with me." Lilina just thought the other party's words were very funny, playing with the string around her waist, and said, "There are 5 cadres of the one-eyed family, and I happen to be among them, although my strength is not as good as that of a penguin, and my dodge is not as good as that of a penguin. Chef, I am not as fast as a mermaid, and I don't know much about swordsmanship, but if you think that I am just a beautiful woman, you are very wrong. I don't care if you are a cadre or not." Mikkel's 2 cat paws flashed faint light blue electric currents, jumping faintly on his body. After all, she flashed her body and rushed towards Lilina. After coming to the Great Root, she was also taught the 6th naval form by Buggy, but the time was too short, and her foot strength was not enough to be caught by the naked eye. However, her movement was still quite fast, and her body turned into an afterimage at this time. Lilina's movements were not slow either. From her very deceptive appearance, it was impossible to tell that such a weak woman was actually an assassin-type opponent. When Mikkel was about to rush in front of her eyes, she hung up the silk thread in her hand and brought her body to the eaves. At the same time, she shot a white and almost transparent silk thread at Mikkel, who was rushing over with her other hand. The flexibility and strength of the silk thread just being able to reach a balance, Mikkel, who was already raising his hand to grab the head-on, only felt a blur in front of his eyes. The direction of his hands was like hitting cotton, and his body fell forward staggeringly. Go. In the blink of an eye, Mikkel suddenly stopped and ran towards Kia in the corner. As long as he saves Kia, he won't have to fight this annoying woman anymore. A flash of sharpness flashed in Lilina's eyes, and the silk thread on her left hand stabbed straight, faster than Mikkel's footsteps, and shot on the stone floor in front of Kia. Suddenly there was a loud noise on the ground, dust filled the air, and countless broken stones splashed in all directions. Mikkel had no choice but to stop in his tracks. When the smoke cleared, a large crater with a width of several meters and a depth of half a meter appeared on the ground, as if it had been stuffed with explosives and exploded. Kia's body, the shape is gone again. Don't break the rules of the game, or I'll destroy this beautiful work of art next time, kitty. Lilina hung Kia's body with a silk thread, pulled it directly to the platform of the house, put it away, and then said to Mikkel with a smile. Looking at the big crater like an explosion on the ground, Mikkel pursed his lips and turned his head to look at Lilina. His 2 cat ears kept trembling, and he suddenly jumped up. The amazing jumping ability made she jumped onto the roof more than 6 meters high. Static enhancement. Mikkel seemed to have fried his fur, and the electrostatic current on the fur was even greater. Even in the sun, this blue static electricity was clearly visible. The fur tribe is covered with a thick layer of fur, so in a dry environment, it can use itself to generate static electricity to paralyze the enemy's nerves. At this time, she grabbed Lilina claw by claw, and the static electricity on the fur looked terrible. Although Lilina showed a look of fear on her face, the silk thread in her hand was easily carried around Mikkel's wrist. Whenever the latter was about to hit her, she would be pulled to other directions by the thread and missed. In this battle, Lilina seems to have the upper hand. Jalo, Wangshuda. This should be the tallest building in the entire Gallo, but the top of the tower does not seem to be under construction yet. In other words, the tower has been delayed for nearly a year for various reasons, and it is not intended to be completed, just to hide Diderot's real purpose inside. The wall outside the tower has not been painted yet, without any color, nor any embellishment decorations. It looks very plain and unpretentious, which does not match the word, Wan Shu, in the name of this tower. Buggy was looking at the front of the tower at this time. The height of this tower was nearly 100 meters, which should be considered unique in the world of One Piece. He knew that Alex had evil intentions, and he lured him to Wan Shu Tower, probably because of the one-eyed guy, although he didn't know that Alex was planning something on one-eyed. But judging from the information in the phone bug that called on the road just now, it is indeed a good thing that the one-eyed family did to kidnap Kaya. Therefore, no matter whether Kaya is in Pate's company, this Wansho Pagoda or other places, Buggy must come here to find Cyclops, because the moment the opponent makes a move, it means that war has been declared. As the captain, you must accept this gauntlet. If even the captain shrinks back, how should the crew members find their way forward in the perplexing sea? And how will trust and back deliver? It is the captain's responsibility to confirm the direction of progress and shoulder the trust of everyone, and Buggy cannot shirk this responsibility. Buggy walked to the gate of Wanshu Pagoda. This huge iron gate was about 5 meters long and 3 meters wide. It probably weighed several tons. He stretched out his arm and pushed it hard. Squeak. The huge tower door was pushed to make an ancient and heavy sound, and the door kept moving inwards, and finally made a steady sound of graw. The light was cast into the somewhat dim tower, illuminating the fine dust flying in the air. You can see light green moss growing on the walls and stone slabs. It should be that no one has been here for a long time. The first floor of Wanshu Pagoda is very high. The ceiling is at least 10 meters above, and the venue is very large, so the whole space looks very empty, except for intermittent ghostly sounds from the darker interior. This voice. As Buggy walked in, he pricked up his ears and listened carefully to the somewhat familiar voice. His melody was not very good, but his memory was not bad. He had heard this familiar melody in Exe Navison before. Is the song sung by those hula dancers? According to Alex's explanation, this kind of singing is used to control the deep-sea wind and warm shellfish, but at this time the singing sounds more irritable and changes the tone faster. After walking for a while, a tiny light could finally be seen in the distance, and the intermittent singing voice could gradually be heard clearly. Buggy got closer and closer, and finally stopped. He had already seen the source of the light, which came from an invisible deep hole in the ground. The bottom is constantly spinning and flying, emitting pale golden light. The light of a small bug is not obvious, but the light shining from the bodies of small bugs in groups can illuminate the vertically upward ceiling. And on the ceiling hung a huge iron cage, in which dozens of women were imprisoned, and this song came out of their mouths. At the height of the wall of Wanshu Pagoda, there is a light transmitting hole every 5 meters. Although it cannot provide strong light, it can still see the surrounding environment and situation. Pirate Buggy? You actually found this place. Finally, a very old-sounding voice came, and a middle-aged man in a red robe walked over. The light from the cave pulled his figure into a long shadow. Looking at the other person's appearance, Buggy was startled, and asked with a frown, "Are you Diderot?" Diderot smiled slightly, and his eyes fell on the shiny hole. "Yes. I am the ruler of the entire one-eyed family and the finance minister of Santander, and my past name has been abandoned by me. Now, it's my only name." Buggy said with a twinkle in his eyes, "I suppose you have another name, Elder Frog?" "Oh? Your eyesight is pretty good, and you can still recognize me." Diderot looked at Buggy with a half-smile. "Sometimes, I would go to Exe Navison to observe and select powerful pirates myself. Of course a brand new identity is needed, but on weekdays, a substitute who looks like me is used to do the job of guiding the way. In fact, on the first day you came to Exe Navison, I personally played the role of the elder come to receive you and observe you, and at the same time let Benson who came with me recruit you, but unfortunately, because of this Wanshu Pagoda, I left Exe Navison the next day." He looked at Bucky's pensive look, and opened his hand. "Since you can come here alone, it means that you do have some skills. Buggy the Clown, join my pirate group. In this case, I can let go of the past for what Xana Wyson did, and keep up with my pirate ship, and you will be able to see a whole new world." Buggy didn't answer the other party, but asked, "It's because I didn't agree to your request in Exe Navison that you arrested my crew and threatened me?" "Oh. That's what you're talking about," Diderot said calmly. "It's just a prank by one of my subordinates. After you rejected my request, I have given up on recruiting you. After all, the one-eyed family it's not a piece of brown candy. There are as many pirates as you can, and naturally they won't deliberately do boring things for you alone. It's just that you made such a big fuss in Xana Wyson the movement, the courage to come to Jaluo. I can't help but make me look at you with admiration. Now you dare to come to Wanshu Tower alone. You are already stronger than most pirates. Now, I can give you a chance to surrender. Buggy sorted out Diderot's information in his heart, and finally a sly smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Surrender to you? What are you? Diderot's face turned slightly cold. There are too many ignorant and fearless pirates in this world, and they can't learn to respect and fear others. Since I can become a powerful party here and applaud this country, naturally with my business and philosophy, what qualifications do you have to deny everything I do? Buggy the clown. Lanzhou. You by you. Buggy separated and spun his right foot several times, and a disc-shaped white slashing airflow swung out, flying to Diderot in the blink of an eye. Diderot stretched out his hand to stop him. The slashing airflow that could leave deep marks on the red bamboo as hard as metal left a shallow wound on his palm, but he was still caught by the moon-white jade. The huge impact repulsed more than 10 steps, barely stopped, and looked at his palm in surprise. It was able to break through my arm. Domineering. Buggy narrowed his eyes slightly. What qualifications do you ask me? This is my qualification. He said it on his lips, but he had to raise his evaluation of the other party to a higher level in his heart. This Diderot is actually domineering. In the first half of the Great Route, few people can master domineering, and being able to create a leader of such a huge force is indeed a terrific stubble. It's really been a long time since I got hurt. Diderot finally shifted his eyes from the wound on his hand to Buggy, with a complicated look on his face, as if he felt remorse and self-blame for his carelessness. I thought it was enough to be cautious. I didn't expect to underestimate you. Buggy smiled slyly. It was just an appetizer, and then the fun will begin. Okay. Very good. A pirate stabbed me blind in one eye 10 years ago. 10 years later today another pirate wants to challenge me, but I will not repeat the same mistakes. I will spare no room for your. The little devil was wiped out in one fell swoop. Diderot's face became grim, and the red robe he was wearing swelled up bit by bit, and then countless cracks appeared in his clothes, which burst open suddenly, revealing a brown disgusting epidermis. Stained with countless liquids, his face also began to swell up like a full balloon, and the shape of his face was also changing. The left and right cheeks began to swell up, and his 2 eyes kept moving upwards, looking like a toad. But what is a little abrupt is that there are 3 manes like willow leaves on the back of his head. Diderot's 2 eyes fixed on Buggy. I'll let you see the ancient species of devil fruit animal. The knife and toad are powerful. Buggy took off his coat, and threw the phone bug into the coat, and put it in a far corner. He picked up the 10 hands behind his back, and got ready to fight. Suddenly, a cold light flashed behind Diderot's back. Boom. The sound of metal breaking came from behind Diderot's huge body. He turned around quickly, but his seemingly clumsy body turned around very quickly, and he faced the person behind him in the blink of an eye. The joy of the successful sneak attack on the face of the person behind him instantly turned into astonishment. He staggered back, looked at the broken knife in his hand, and murmured unwillingly, "How could it be? How could it be ineffective?" Diderot's eyes sharpened, but his expression could no longer be seen on his animal face, and the thin and long tongue in his mouth was thrown at the man like a sharp arrow, tightening his hands, feet and body tightly. Tightly entangled, unable to move. "You are Endy, the captain of the Jackal Pirates. How are you here?" Endy's body at this time has also turned into the appearance of an animal-type jackal. The animal-type fruit itself will provide him with power over ordinary people, but facing Diderot at this time, he can't break free. Struggling, the tighter the body is bound, the bones of the whole body seem to be crushed by this huge squeezing force. This kind of pain finally made him clearly realize the horror of the animal-type fruit ability user in front of him. "Yes, that swordsman asked me to come and assassinate you. He said, as long as I kill you, he will give me that red pill." In the tower where the view is not so good, Diderot's toad-like cheeks and body look even more terrifying in Endy's eyes, just like hell creatures in fairy tales. All the words came out in one go. "It's him." Diderot's eyes flashed with anger, and then the 3 willow-like manes on the back of his head moved forward without any wind, and suddenly swung forward, cutting off Endy's entire head suddenly. Blood spurted out from the headless corpse like a spring, and it looked even more strange in the golden light cast from the cave. Endy, the captain of the Jackal Pirates with a reward of 30 million, is like a child in the hands of an adult in the hands of Diderot. Although they are both animals, there is a huge difference between the two. It is conceivable that this how amazing the power of one eye must be. Buggy has been looking for Diderot's flaws, but he found that even if Diderot turned his back to him, he never let go of his defense. The swelling on his body was swollen, so Buggy couldn't find it at all. Any opportunity, or in other words, there is full caution hidden in this person's character. "I finally know." Diderot threw Endy's body away like trash, and said with a cold face, Who did all this? Alex, it's really possible. He turned to look at Bucky. You were also attracted by Alex. Bucky replied. You were also my target. Since you have allowed your subordinates to capture my crew, there is naturally no room for negotiation between us. Then you and this stupid wolf will die together. After finishing speaking, the tongue in Diderot's mouth shot towards Bucky like a prick, and there was a low explosion in the air, which shows how terrifying its speed is. Lanjiao. You by you. This is the most powerful kick of Lan's kick that Bucky can use so far. It is deeper in color than the general pale white slashing airflow, and the slashing blow is also sharper, so it was only possible to break Diderot's hands just now. Armed with a domineering look, he shot towards Diderot without hesitation at this moment. Diderot's tongue was very flexible, and at this time he was able to abruptly change its trajectory in the air. The moment before it hit the slashing airflow, his tongue bent upwards like a wave to avoid it, and while stabbing Bucky, his entire toad body, he also jumped into the air, concentrating all the strength of his body on the tip of his tongue. Instead, Bucky didn't have time to make too many movements, so he had to block his body with one hand, and the other left hand holding 10 hands was ready to go. Once the opponent approached, he would use the sea tower stone on 10 hands to contain the opponent. But Diderot's tongue was still too fast. The moment it hit Bucky, a ring spread out in the air and was dyed golden by the light in the cave. Bucky's body was like a cannonball, and he was directly smashed into the ground by the force from above. The layers of the ground were destroyed layer by layer, and he was smashed into a deeper part of the ground, sinking crazily for nearly 10 meters. Finally, his body finally stopped and got stuck in the ground. Diderot landed on the ground, the surrounding dust filled immediately, and even the ground sank slightly because of his huge body. He retracted his tongue, looked at the big hole Bucky hit, and snorted coldly. This is the new era, the power of pirates. That's all. The ground suddenly shook slightly, and Diderot looked at his feet in amazement, only to see dense cracks appearing around his feet, and then a figure broke out from the ground. A powerful force lifted Diderot's entire body, and then threw it heavily towards the ceiling. Compared with the space in the tower, his body had the illusion of being as huge as a meteorite, and then smashed a solid ceiling out of the solid ceiling. The terrifying big hole remained undiminished, and flew upwards, smashing the ceiling of the 3rd floor of Wanshu Tower to pieces, and finally crashed and stopped on the 4th floor of Wanshu Tower. Rushed stones fell from the ceiling. Looking up, the 3 floors were connected with 3 big holes. However, there seems to be no such thing as reinforced concrete in this world. The ceiling is not as strong as imagined. Once it is smashed, the falling debris was even more exaggerated than imagined. Bucky wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Diderot's blow just now was astonishingly powerful. The muscles on his tongue should have been trained for many years to achieve such flexibility and terrifying strength. Still possessing arrogance, this blow almost made him unable to stand up, and his body was numb for several seconds before regaining consciousness. An enemy of this level is the most terrifying opponent he has encountered since he came out of the East China Sea. Diderot finally jumped back from the 4th floor to the ground of the 1st floor. The moment he landed, the whole ground seemed to tremble. His body was very strong, even ordinary swords couldn't break through his skin just now, and the impact this time also didn't bring him any real damage. However, his condition didn't look very good. He was panting heavily with his mouth open, like an asthma patient who couldn't breathe. Diderot rolled his tongue into the pocket of his loose trousers, rolled up a bunch of red pills, swallowed them all at once, and the panting slowed down. He looked at Bucky coldly. If it wasn't because of this old and weak body that restrained me, if it wasn't because of the damn years that ate me away, how could I be forced to such an extent by a little pirate like you? You don't even have the courage to admit the reality. You'd better treat yourself like a toad. Holding 10 hands, Bucky rushed up and disappeared in place in an instant. Push. Diderot didn't answer, but wrapped his armed domineering hands with 2 exaggerated palms twice the size of ordinary people, and pushed them forward. Bucky's rapid movement was invisible to the naked eye, but for the animal toad as for the later Diderot, his eyes were able to catch moving objects more easily. So in fact, Bucky's speed was very fast, but the trajectory of his actions was projected in Diderot's eyes like a slideshow, and Ping's palm hit the fast-moving Bucky. Shaved. Moondrum. When Bucky was still a few meters away from the palm that Diderot pushed, he twisted his footsteps rhythmically, and changed his direction quickly. With a wrong figure, he had already appeared 5 or 6 meters to the left of Diderot afterwards. His footsteps swayed to the right again, approaching the left side of Diderot in an instant as if he had made an extra triangle angle. Immediately, he touched the ground with his toes and jumped high. The 10 hands in his hands were like waving a baseball bat. hit Diderot's left forehead. The Hailu stone on the tip of the 10 hands can definitely have a fatal restraint effect on Diderot of the animal department. Even if it can't break his skin, it will affect his entire body. Suddenly, the willow leaf-like mane on Diderot's left side rose up and cut towards the middle of the 10 hands, trying to resist. But it was too late, and Buggy had already slapped Diderot on the forehead with a heavy blow. The moment Diderot was touched by Hailushi, his body began to shrink continuously, and he changed back to a human form in the blink of an eye. Then he kept stumbling on the ground for a distance of tens of meters, and finally smashed the huge wall of Wanshu Pagoda into powder. Hailu stone is different from the sea, or the former is the energization of the sea, not only can make the capable person lose their strength, but also has a sealing effect on the capable person, and its hardness is even comparable to a diamond. After Buggy knocked Diderot into the air, he landed on the ground. The shaved moon treading drum he used just now was integrated with the special skill, spoon, of the former captain of the Black Cat Pirates. During the process, the footsteps are integrated into the beat like the drumbeat of each sound. As long as you step on this point, you can adjust the direction of the teleportation. It is precisely because of the foundation provided by the foot strength practice on the Gravity Island that Buggy can achieve this level. He even has a feeling that if he continues to strengthen this aspect of practice, he may be able to achieve the level of instantaneous curve movement in the future. In fact, the sixth form of the Navy is only the most basic move, which can generate many changes and has a lot of room for development. Just like in the original book, Lu Chi combined Moonstep and Shave to form a razor. Another example is that he can use the tail of the leopard to hit the slashing effect of the hazy feet, and the giraffe Kaku developed the Zhou Duan, that can cut off the entire house and the airflow of the hazy feet that hits a large area. Kiran Shigur, even Gabra's development of iron blocks is unique. He can use iron blocks while acting. He may be the only one in the entire CP9 who can do it. It can be said that the sixth form of the Navy can be regarded as a piece of ground that has already been laid with pile foundations. If you want to build any shape or use for any purpose on it, it depends entirely on your personal development, imagination and practice. However, Buggy was not happy at this time because he could change the moving direction of the razor. He looked at the 10 hands that had been broken into 2 parts with a sad face. The same mane also cut off the part made of fine iron in the middle of the 10 hands. The connecting handle of the 10 hands is about 30 centimeters long, but this part is no different from ordinary weapons. The key is that the upper half of the inlaid Hailu stone is only 10 centimeters, which means that it is already difficult to use it in battle. Hold it in your hand and use it as a weapon. However, the effect of this swing is still very significant. Diderot's body after lifting the animalization is obviously not as strong as before. He lay down in the rubble pile for half a minute before standing up unsteadily. When he got up, his clothes were ragged, his body was covered with small wounds from the stones, he looked very embarrassed, and he was panting continuously, making a sound like sucking an empty pipe. He looked at Buggy with red eyes, without saying a word, and then his body changed again. His thin arms swelled and thickened, revealing the brown outer skin, and his head took on the shape of a toad. Reaching out from behind, he pulled off the 2 willow leaf-shaped manes and held them in his hands. The animal devil fruit can animalize a part of the body, and the same is true for Diderot. The biggest advantage of the toad animal is the eyes that can catch fast-moving objects, a very muscular tongue, and powerful forelimbs, but there are also hind limbs underdeveloped this weakness. Although only the animalization of the whole body can make Diderot's strength reach the highest point, but only the animalization of the head and hands can abandon the weakness of the feet, and allow the speed to reach the limit while possessing strength. Those who stop me all die. Diderot held the sharp blade formed by the mane of willow leaves in both hands, and swung forward. Ja'aluo, a small hill outside the city. The non-commissioned officer on the side held several small phone bugs, and faced Jonathan, who was looking at the entire capital. Report Lieutenant General, there is no trace of the pirate D. Kellogg so far. Jonathan frowned, stroking his thick orange beard. How could it be? Hearing the wanted and hunted by the Navy, why would he hide in Galore and refuse to come out? He is not afraid that when the time comes the whole Navy carpet search. What the hell is he trying to do? While thinking, Jonathan looked at the old copy of the bounty list in his hand. This was the fax he asked for from the Navy headquarters. D. Kaluo's bounty was destroyed 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the red-haired pirates entered the New World. In the first battle, they encountered D. Kellogg, who offered a reward of 76 million. In that battle, the Toad pirates led by D. Kellogg were wiped out, and D. Kellogg was also there. He disappeared in this battle and disappeared, so that the Navy thought that he died in the hands of the red-haired pirates and revoked the reward list. But this battle started the reputation of red-haired in the New World, and since then it has been in full swing. Finally achieved the name of the 4 emperors. Looking at the sinful face on the reward list, Jonathan felt a little worried. Although DeCaluo's reward amount was not very high, it made people have to pay attention to his origin. DeCello, the captain of the Toad Pirates, he is a contemporaneous figure with Roger Pirate, Whitebeard, Golden Lion and others. Although DeCello can't compare with the previous monsters, or even as far behind, but only the 4 words last era, can it shows that DeCello is strong enough to shoulder many powerful pirates. However, most of the pirates left over from the previous era have a fatal weakness, age. If counted according to age, DeCello is now around 70 years old, his physical strength and speed have been greatly reduced, not as good as before, and his strength may have been declining when he fought against the red hair. Stage. No more. Jonathan clapped his hands suddenly, get ready to enter Gallo and take down all the rebels. And our first target this time. Gallo Palace. A group of soldiers wearing light yellow knight armor surrounded the man in the middle who was dressed in bright clothes, wearing a silver-white cloak and wearing a prince's laurel crown through the majestic palace gate and entered the huge palace. The soldiers stepped back to the side of the palace with neat steps, standing upright in 2 rows, exuding a murderous aura like cold autumn. On the throne, an old man who seemed to be dying was leaning on the armrest with his left hand, leaning on his drowsy head. He suddenly woke up, opened his heavy eyelids, and looked at the walking on the red carpet in front of him blankly. The man nearby said weakly, "Coxie, why are you here? Didn't I order you to stand guard on Monroe Street? My dear father, do you know that your people are suffering and struggling under the raised butcher's knife? Do you know that your king's capital is dying, and under the instigation of the one-eyed family, it has become a battleground for all parties? Do you know that your country is heading towards death and will be completely destroyed in the tsunami driven by the wheels of history? The mastermind behind all this is your most trusted finance minister, Diderot." Koshi walked to 5 meters in front of the old king, stopped at the bottom of the steps, his eyes were heavy and regretted, "And you, doing nothing, are willing to indulge the guards of the royal city and become the accomplice of the instigator. I miss you, I should regret it now. Cozy, you really don't know what to say, do you know who you are talking to?" As he said that, the old king roared suddenly, his eyes widened, exuding the aura of a superior that he had cultivated for many years. "You are facing me, your father. I am the king of this country." Just after finishing speaking, his spirit became depressed, and the sunken eye sockets became more obvious at the moment, and he said in a low voice, "Go on, don't bother me anymore." "No, you're wrong." Coxie pulled out the saber at his waist. "I'm not begging you. A gentleman told me that you just need to knock down rotten things in one fell swoop. And now I'm going to use the most primitive and most saving the entire country by brutal means. I will use all my strength to protect this love, this country that I have been born and raised for many years." He swung his saber, and drew a meticulous thin line in the eyes of the old king who couldn't believe it. Bang! The pearly crown on the old king's head fell to the ground, making a crisp sound, accompanied by the old king's black or white strands of hair slowly falling in the air. Kashi bent down, picked up the crown that fell on the ground, patted it lightly, glanced at the disheveled old king, turned his back, replaced the prince's laurel crown with the king's crown, and said without emotion, "You already old, and I will be crowned king." "Nee. Son." The old king panted loudly excitedly. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Coxie, "Chief Knight, bring the king's phone bug." "Yes, King Koshi." Standing at the front left of the palace, the soldier wearing light yellow knight armor came out of the line, walked straight forward, searched the king's powerless body roughly, and finally found a hole in his chest. He searched everywhere and found a crimson phone bug with closed eyes, then walked to Kochi's side, and handed it over respectfully. Koshi took over the crimson phone bug with a serious face. This phone bug has been kept by the king of Santa City for generations, and has the direct power to mobilize the guards of the royal city, which symbolizes the supreme power of the kingdom. He picked up the phone bug, pressed the button on the top, and conveyed the highest order with a serious face. "All officers and men obey the order and fully cooperate with the Navy to catch the traitor. Anyone who violates will be killed." This sentence will be conveyed to the red phone bugs in each brigade and each squad of the Royal City Guard. No matter who gives the order, the soldiers who receive the order will execute it without hesitation. It was precisely because these guards of the royal city were sent out by the old king that the palace was empty of troops, allowing Koshi to enter in one fell swoop. No. The old king got off the throne tremblingly, crawled on the ground in embarrassment, hugged Coxie's thigh, and the saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth to the ground indistinctly. No, no. To arrest Diderot, I need his medicine. Koshi just glanced down at the old king, and then looked up at the light projected from outside the palace. If you get the medicine that satisfies you, then the medicine that refreshes the spirit of this country will fall into the bottomless the abyss. Gallo, the alley on the north side of Pate Company. The sound of sword clashing was endless, and Kabaji and Alex were fighting together, inseparable. The black sword in Alex's hand is a soft sword, very flexible, and can bend the sword body at will and change the direction of attack while stabbing. He was even more flustered with his sudden oblique stabs and slashes. After fighting for a long time, he gradually became familiar with the opponent's attack methods, but even so, the opponent's tricky attack angles still made him hard to guard against. Smoke sickle. Alex suddenly changed his move, his sword bent into an arc, and slashed at Kabaji from bottom to top like a vertical sharp sickle. Retroactive slash. Kabaji was holding the handle of the knife, and in an instant the Sakura Fubuki in his hand rotated clockwise downwards, his palm was slightly opened, and only his fingers were attached to the handle of the knife, and the next moment he held it with his backhand and slammed down. At the moment when the swords collided, there seemed to be an illusion that time had slowed down, but in the blink of an eye, everything suddenly returned to normal. The blade of the sword cut towards Alex's wrist. Alex shook his wrist, and the black sword in his hand was like rolling waves, trying to disrupt Kabaji's attack, but after making the movement, there was already a severe pain on his wrist, which made him straight up instantly. Straight back, not daring to fight recklessly. Looking down at the right wrist again, a vertical narrow wound in the center of the palm extended to a position 10 centimeters below the wrist. Just a little movement of the fingers, the wrist will feel a dull pain. Kabaji held the knife behind his back. During the fierce battle just now, the blue and white plaid scarf around his neck has become very broken, and there are many knife wounds on his body from Alex. He looked at the other party with gloomy eyes. Don't think my kendo is just that simple. I haven't experienced such a hardy battle for a long time. Alex took off his white clothes without haste, revealing his strong muscles. You can see the gray vertical eye tattoo on his right wrist, and on the left hand, there is a red vertical eye tattoo. In the Zanavesan hotel before, what he deliberately exposed was the gray vertical eye on his right wrist. Kabaji stared at Alex's left wrist. So you are also a cadre of the one-eyed family. Listening to Kabaji's words, Alex suddenly laughed refreshingly, and wiped his face covered with hideous scars from top to bottom with his left hand. I was indeed a pirate once, and I owned 3 pirate ships. Admiral, but my subordinates were not killed by one-eyed, but I killed and buried them all with my own hands, and the scar on my face was left in that battle. After that, I joined One-Eyed. The family, responsible for the security of Xe Navasan, has become the supreme commander of the 200 people with black vertical eyes in Xe Navasan. His voice paused. Do you know why I did this? I don't want to know about those boring and dirty things in your past. Kabaji replied gloomily. This is because, Alex smiled as if asking and answering himself, took out several red pills from his pants, swallowed them in one gulp, looked at Kabaji with red eyes, and his voice became a little cold. This kind of one-eyed family is unique. This thing can bring me unprecedented strength. Now let you experience the real smoke sword. The black sword in Alex's hand swung out flatly, and a sword aura like a curling green smoke whose trajectory could not be seen clearly came out from the edge of his sword. Before Kabaji could react, he was startled suddenly. A smooth cut appeared between the first and second floors of the house behind him without any warning. The crooked, irregular smoke-like wounds were only faintly visible. He touched the blood from his chest in some unbelievable way. In an instant, he felt the opponent's strength and the black sword became violent. The power of fanatic grass is really an addictive power. Alex couldn't feel the pain on his wrist at all at this time. No matter how many times he took this pill, he felt like he was taking it for the first time. The excitement at the next moment, the power is gushing out from all parts of the body. Although the more times you eat the fanatic grass, the effect of the medicine will continue to weaken as more and more antibodies are produced in the body. Maybe eating 10 grams of pills can only increase 30 manpower, but it does not prevent Alex from attacking him. Fascinated by it, right now, he has swallowed at least dozens of grams of this pill. Smoky ink. Alex swung the black sword quickly, like splashing ink on white paper, outlining several coiled sword auras around his body. At the same time, his body and sword aura went hand in hand, as if he regarded himself as a sharp. The sword stabbed straight at Kabaji. Liaguang Qinshui. Kabaji didn't care about the pain in his chest, and went up to meet him in an instant. The Sakura Fubuki in his hand suddenly turned into hundreds of orderly snowflakes, exuding a biting coldness, like an invisible thin blade. Approaching each other, it turned into a white afterimage for a moment. Black and white intersected, and there was a strong buzz in the air. The figures of the two staggered in an instant, and then turned around at the same time, looking at each other. Alex's eyes showed a coldness, and Kabaji's chest had several holes the size of bullet holes. His legs and feet went limp, almost collapsed. Kabaji's cheeks puffed up, his throat throbbed, and the gushing blood was swallowed by him again, and he was trying to stabilize his breathing. Alex sneered. It's useless, you can't be my opponent, you can't break through my defenses, and you can't stop my attacks. In the end, there is only one dead end. How will you know if you don't try? Kabaji slashed over with a knife, and Alex's figure was much faster than before, just like a light smoke changing the position of his body at various incredible angles. The flexibility of the body and the movement of swinging the sword have all increased by a large step, but he just flicked left and right, and played Kabaji with applause. Smokescreen. The black sword in Alex's hand was pushed towards Kabaji Ping, like a black curtain swept over in one fell swoop, as if to cover all the light, making it difficult to distinguish the direction of his attack from the black sword hidden in it. Location. Korancho Cross. The Sakura Fubuki waved by Kabaji suddenly scattered like countless cross snowflakes, densely packed like a fishing net, blocking in front of him. But the black sword in Alex's hand was like a spirit snake, entangled along the cross snowflake fishing net formed by Kabaji, and slashed down through the mesh of this knife-light structure fishing net at an inconceivable angle. Kabaji held the handle of the knife with his thumb and little finger, and instantly blocked in front of him. Clang. Accompanied by the sound of the sword striking, Kabaji only felt a terrible force coming from the sword body, his tiger's mouth numbed slightly, and then this force crushed him downwards, and then the black sword in Alex's hand changed direction again, almost at a 90-degree angle towards Kabaji's throat, trying to pierce it. It was only Alex's hand holding the black sword that suddenly paused slightly, allowing Kabaji to step back in this fleeting moment. Oh. Does your kendo just make your sense of existence disappear or increase? Alex looked at Kabaji with interest. But it's useless. What can such fancy means do? It just makes you run around like a mouse temporarily. If the current me can't do anything, then let me go beyond the current me. Kabaji took a deep breath, holding the handle of the knife with his backhand, the point of the knife facing down vertically, covered by the sharp blade the bridge of his nose, and his right eyes slowly opened wide, and he said in a deep voice. I heard that there is a way of swordsmanship that can listen to the breath of all things and cut off steel, but everything in the world has its own way back. I also have my own way back to the way of the sword. I don't need to listen to the sound or feel the breath, just cut off all existence at the same time. Returning to nothingness is enough. Whether it is attacking or defending, it is not worth the blow to break the emptiness. No matter what kind of kendo you use. You can't be my opponent. Alex sneered, and the black sword in his hand began to dance in the air, long smoke for thousands of miles. His body was like an illusory mist, and he seemed to be moving very slowly, but he approached in an instant. The black sword seemed to spread around, and it seemed to dye the entire space in black. Kaba closed his eyes and used all his strength to perceive the darkness in front of him. He felt as if he had suddenly disappeared into this world. His 5 senses were deprived, and he couldn't even control his body. Only his mind could feel the existence of external objects. Suddenly, he could see a moving silk thread in his mind, which became clearer and closer. At this moment, it seemed that time began to speed up. And at this moment he felt that he had regained his 5 senses. With a wave, the sword goes out. The silk thread in the dark broke, as if I heard a clear and crisp sound of breaking. In the battlefield, the black color that seems to be able to entangle everything gradually shrinks and disappears, and 2 bodies that are several meters away from each other fall to the ground almost at the same time. Alex's eyes widened, and he unbelievably let go of his right hand holding the black sword. At this time, a fist-sized hole was pierced through his heart, and he said with the last consciousness, You. Why can you hide? Let me do this. Because, Kabaji stood up clutching his violently heaving chest, and indifferently put Sakura Fubuki, who was not stained with any blood, into the scabbard, in this way. Only then can I follow in the footsteps of Captain Buggy and continue sailing on this sea. If you fall. You can't do anything. Bang. At this moment, a crack appeared on the body of the black sword, which was inserted into the ground and polished by fine iron, and then turned into 2 sections. Jaaluo, the residential area on the northwest side of Pate Company. Shuma was still in a stalemate confrontation with Benson,
from the roof to the ground, and then from the ground to the eaves, because walking in the air all the time would consume a lot of energy, and Shuma had to give up fighting in the air. Landed on the eaves, but at the same time repelled the opponent with the raptor boomerang in his hand or used reverse shaving to distance himself from Benson.
In fact, Benson doesn't want to get entangled with Shuma. He himself has the task assigned by Diderot to go to the shipyard to take out the pirate ship. This is not something that a phone bug can do, but he himself go in person. However, Shuma's speed is very fast, and once he is stuck, there is no way to shake him off. You can't run and run, but you can't fight. If you want to stop and take a break, take a breath, he will come to harass you again. If Buggy is here, he will definitely praise Shuma for having the same breath when Tezu fought guerrilla warfare. Elegant demeanor. It is such an enemy that makes Benson extremely headache. It is like a woman wearing a sexy suspender showing her beautiful figure through the transparent glass curtain wall of the room. It was found that the glass curtain wall had no entrance at all, and the glass was bulletproof tempered glass. Not only that, but the other party's unreasonable cooking concept almost made Benson's lungs explode. The other party has never even eaten fried chocolate. His life is simply an incomplete and gloomy life. Benson no longer intends to get entangled with Shuma anymore, but to eliminate the other party in one go, because his knowledgeable domineering has also consumed a lot in this battle, and it will soon bottom out. If this continues, he will definitely lose. With a heavy step on his right foot, nearly 100 tiles on the roof were shaken, and then the spoon in his hand was thrown out. His figure seemed to be dancing, and he swung his hands quickly, hitting all the tiles to the ground with precision. Repairing a horse in the distance.
Nearly 100 pieces of fragments shot from all directions like meteors, blocking all the directions that Shuma wanted to dodge. Shuma simply stopped dodging, but took the raptor boomerang in his hand and used specific gestures to quickly switch back and forth between the two hands, but suddenly, the airflow driven back and forth formed a visible wind wall, whistling. Then the wind wall spread upwards and downwards, forming a barrier just enough to protect the surroundings of the whole body. When all the rubble touched the wind wall, they were blown down by the surging airflow and fell to the ground.
However, these rubbles were just Benson's actions to delay Shuma's actions. While Shuma was resisting, Benson dodged along the eaves between the two of them, instantly shortening the distance between Shuma and Shuma. He raised his spoon and fork high above his head, hitting Shuma directly on the forehead. Coffee bibimbap. The moment Shuma retracted the boomerang that formed the wind wall, the spoon and fork in Benson's left and right hands had already split off. He quickly blocked the boomerang above his head, and then the huge force knocked down his entire body like a cannonball. The roof of the standing house was shot down into the house, and the whole house collapsed immediately. Rubble and broken bricks flew around, and dust spread everywhere. A life like yours should be destroyed. If you have a next life, you'd better hope to experience real cooking instead of living in a dark and empty life. Benson jumped to the roof of another house looking at the direction where Shuma was shot down. He muttered sympathetically. After finishing speaking, he was about to leave, when suddenly his face changed drastically, and a strong wind came into his ears. No, it should be felt by his domineering. But this voice, no, it's just one direction, and it seems to be coming from all directions. Even with the bonus of knowledge and domineering, he still doesn't know which direction to dodge. Damn it. Benson gritted his teeth and looked in all directions. The spoon and fork hit each other to protect the whole body, and the whole body began to rotate, covering the whole body. Sweet and sour hot pot super sweet version. You heretic chef. Let me tell you the real recipe. Crack the eggs. Shuma's unbearable voice came mixed with the sound of the wind, and then a wind current with a diameter of tens of meters from bottom to top surged in the air, like a huge stick, and swung towards Benson. This dart with a tornado hit his abdomen directly, and the pain in his abdomen made his eyes widen inexplicably, and his body flew out like a shell. Scramble the eggs and add salt to me. Shuma stepped on the moon steps. His body was merged into this wind current, and he caught up with Benson, who was flying upside down in the air. With him as the center point, he stepped on the moon steps and instantly turned into a shadowless afterimage in the air. Fang Shong kept chopping Benson's body back and forth with the boomerang in his hand. Bang bang bang. The sound of being hit like a cloth bag and the sound of painful wailing continued to be heard in the air. Fried eggs, put oil on me. Shuma suddenly flew below Benson, and suddenly kicked Benson's back in the air, sending the latter flying to a height of more than 10 meters, and Shuma stepped on the moon again to pursue upwards, and he burst out instantly. The speed surpassed Benson, who was hit upwards, and flew to the top of Benson, holding the boomerang tightly in his hand, and shot it downwards. The last thing is to turn it over and fry it again. Raptor wind gun. The raptor boomerang was wrapped in a strong wind and pressed Benson's body downward, like a sharp spear pointing straight down, and finally plunged into the ground. Boom. The ground exploded like thunder on the flat ground, and countless dust mixed with grass clippings flew up. After the dust disappeared, a large pit more than 3 meters deep appeared on the ground. Benson lay twisted on the ground, his eyes were white, and he didn't know whether he was dead or alive. Shuma landed on the ground, pulled out the raptor boomerang from Benson's chest, and received it. Even the simplest poached egg, as long as you cook it with your heart, it will be the most delicious dish. As he spoke, he took out a small piece of pepper from his pocket, chewed it in his mouth, pondered for a while, and suddenly showed a look of surprise on his face. Go back and try fried coconut with chili pepper. Maybe it's really good. Tasty. Gallo, the west side of Pate Company. Mochi and Penguin Boy looked at each other with bruised noses and bruised faces, panting.
The Penguin Boy snorted coldly, looked at Mochi, and habitually kept his lines in his mouth when performing dramas, and said righteously, riding the wind and waves, overcoming the thorns and thorns, the Penguin Boy will do good to the evil deeds you have done. Give a fair trial. This is the duty of the justice group.
After all, his chubby fist quickly swung over, penguin punch. HMPH. Master Mochi will not be blocked by mere penguins. All animals in this world cannot escape the claws of the beast trainer. Iron block. Shock storage. Mochi didn't dodge or dodge, standing where he was, with his hands crossed in front of him. Boom. He took the Penguin Boy's punch hard, and there was a sound like metal hitting on his body. He couldn't move and make actions while using the iron block. Once he acted, it meant that the state of the iron block was lifted. Iron block training can break away from this framework. But Mochi didn't just use the iron block, but also activated the characteristic of storing fruit. Although he couldn't move his body, he could store the impact of that punch, and then counterattack the opponent with the power stored in his body. However, he does not simply store damage, but any energy stored in his body can be activated again after being processed by the storage space in his body. Storage. Shock broken needle bullets. The moment he absorbed all the strength of the Penguin Boy, he released the iron block, and concentrated the stored energy in the palm of his hand, then swung it towards the Penguin Boy, and the invisible energy in his hand shot out like dense fragmented bullets. Touched the Penguin Boy's chest and made a da-da-da sound. The Penguin Boy was constantly repulsed by this dense force, and then Mochi raised his foot and kicked the Penguin Boy's chest, as if he heard the sound of graw in the air, as if the sternum had been kicked off. Penguin Boy rolled and fell to the ground, constantly losing strength, and finally stopped. He clenched his hands, looked at Mochi very annoyed, and suddenly shouted, "Penguin Warrior, transform." After all, the body began to swell, a thin layer of fluff grew on the outside, the mouth also began to become a long beak, the hands became flattened like surfboards, and the 2 feet that were originally too short shorter and flatter. He looked at Mochi with a righteous face. I am a devil fruit capable person of the animal emperor penguin, and I want to represent justice, to destroy you.
Penguin. Mochi stared at the Penguin Boy, rushed forward, and slammed his hands in hatred. Master Mochi has never seen an animal as ugly as you.
Hey. You goat has no right to accuse me. The Penguin Boy was stunned for half a second, then gnashed his teeth and swung his 2 flat arms to fight back, Penguin Feather Strike. The 2 arms of the Penguin Boy are like 2 innate knives, wielding vigorously. The penguin fruit can bring him a feather density 3 to 4 times greater than that of birds of the same size. The overlapping and close-connected scale-like feather coats can effectively weaken and resist the impact of the outside world, and the penguin's bones are very hard, which makes every move of him very strong and powerful, and the slightly broken sternum has gradually become harder, no longer so painful. The physical strength provided by the fruit ability immediately makes Penguin Boy attack confidently, without worrying about his own defense at all, because Yuya will weaken the damage Mochi hits him, which also makes Mochi become very passive when storing attacks, often before it's too late to make a move. Penguin Boy's stormy offensive will continue to come like a desperate Saburo. And Mochi stored more and more striking energy in his body, and the force he swung out was too late to catch up with the stored energy. It was like a swimming pool that was constantly flowing in and out of water. The water level was already rising, and the pool was about to overflow. Just in a trance, the rhythm of the battle has been biased towards the Penguin Boy, and he is waving his flat hands faster and faster. Penguin fight. Iron block. Rashomon. Mochi gritted his teeth to prevent the energy in the storage space in his body from exploding, and resorted to the largest iron defense, like a hard city wall constantly resisting the attack from the opponent's siege cannon. Boom. There was a subwoofer sound in the air, and Mochi was finally knocked out after being hit hard in the abdomen. His body was like a whistle, and a wave of air was ejected in all directions, and his mouth was even more long. Take a breath. After gaining the fruit ability for more than a year, it was also the first time that he encountered the situation where the storage space in his body reached the upper limit. If he hadn't finally discharged the energy in the body in the form of gas, his entire body would probably be backlashed by this energy. Even so, there was a small crack extending outward in the storage space in Mochi's body, extending from the inner body to the slightly below the heart of the left chest, and the wound was in a spiral shape.
No, no. Mochi touched his chest, shook his head quickly, and murmured in a low voice, "If this continues, Lord Mochi will lose, and will be ridiculed by that bastard Cyclops, and he will fight against him. I can no longer hold my head up in front of me. Never. Lord Mochi can't be defeated like this."
The penguin boy faced Mochi, and said righteously, "You evil white hair, what are you talking to yourself? As long as there is a penguin boy, this land will not breed evil. Villains like you, there will be no room for growth. Idiot penguin. You are not a good person. You are a cadre of the one-eyed family, right? So, stop pretending to me and pretend to be righteous. I am the head of the one-eyed family, and I am actually a pirate." Hearing Mochi's reprimand, the penguin boy actually became depressed, hanging his head, listless.
Good chance. Although Mochi didn't know why the other party's mood changed so quickly, he didn't let go of the gap and rushed over quickly. The sound of his footsteps on the ground and the sound of the surrounding wind were stored in his body, so that the penguin boy, still before he noticed it, he was approached by Mochi.
Beast taming. The lion goes down the mountain. Mochi rolled his body slightly, bent his hands into claws, and grabbed suddenly, tearing off a large piece of finely divided scales and feathers on the penguin boy's chest, leaving 5 claw wounds. The penguin boy suddenly woke up from the pain, and was about to fight back, but he heard Mochi quickly say again, "You are just a criminal pirate. Do you want to escape the punishment given by the justice trial?" The penguin boy froze suddenly. "I'm just an evil penguin. Taming the beast. The lion fights the rabbit." Mochi clenched his fists with both hands, and bombarded the 5 wounds on the penguin boy's chest without scales and feathers. Because of the characteristics of the storage fruit, when the attack falls on the opponent, the reaction to the fist will also be stored in the body. At the same time, it burst out from the arm again, causing the second damage to the enemy. The penguin boy spat out a mouthful of blood, staggered back a distance, his consciousness became clear, and he roared angrily, "You bastard can actually control me. What kind of magic did you use? You should ask yourself, how many things you have done against justice in your life, don't you know how to repent now?" The penguin boy lost his mind again and muttered, "This penguin's life." The last blow, beast taming, million lion punch.
Mochi approached again, and blasted out his right fist. His power was divided into 3 sections, each section was storing the resistance generated by the outside world, and then released in reverse, and the resistance became thrust, like 3 layers of continuously accelerating. The rocket booster made his fist faster and faster, and finally turned into an afterimage and swung at the wound on Penguin Boy's chest. The penguin boy's body is like a boiled shrimp, constantly bending, curling up into a ball in the blink of an eye, like a bowling ball being thrown into the air, flying straight for more than 20 meters, and finally hitting a bungalow in the distance, smashing it to pieces, gravel flying in all directions. Mochi stared deeply at the direction where the penguin flew upside down, and suddenly rubbed his numb and aching right hand in embarrassment, and yelled miserably, "Huh, it's so dangerous, it hurts me to death. This penguin's body is as hard as steel, and it has the ability to store fruit," and Mochi also suffered a lot of retaliation. Then, he walked step by step in the direction where the penguin boy landed. In that one-story house, Penguin Boy's animalization could no longer be maintained. His body turned back into a round and fat human figure, and he lay weakly on the ground. At this moment, tears were streaming down his face, and he choked up his reflection, "I'm just a sinful penguin. I don't belong to any kind of justice at all." Awe-inspiring and awe-inspiring are not synonymous with penguin boys at all. Mochi walked slowly to Penguin Boy, looked at him calmly, "Hey, penguin idiot." The penguin boy cried bitterly, "You kill me, such a sinful life has lost the meaning and value of existence to me. I can't bring justice, I can't bring happiness, there is nothing left for me to miss." Mochi took out a pen and a piece of paper from his pants, and handed them over coldly. "A certain idiot chef on our ship asked me for an autograph of Penguin Boy. Please be quick and sign it." "Why? Why do I have to autograph the sinful me? I don't deserve the title of Penguin Boy. I'm just a sinful one-eyed family cadre. I'm just a pirate."
The Penguin Boy said intermittently that in his acting career all year round, he has been unable to distinguish between the inside and the outside of the play. Unwilling to believe and evade his true identity in reality, Moki's few words now make him feel confused and frustrated. Although, you are the ugliest animal I have ever seen, but you can repent and turn your back on your way. In the eyes of Lord Mochi, you are a respectable opponent. At least, Lord Mochi, I recognize you, recognize this battle. Even if I am so sinful, I will be recognized. The Penguin Boy wept silently, took the pen and paper from Moki's hand, and signed his name crookedly on the white paper with his last strength. Super, how could the hero Penguin Boy have such unbearable thoughts? No matter how many setbacks, he should not defeat the Penguin Boy's determination. Life has only just begun. Tears flickered in his eyes, and he looked up at Mochi very touched. Master Mochi, you were really my confidant. Before he could finish speaking, he heard a bang, and Mochi kicked Penguin Boy directly on the cheek. Give me a good reflection here. The Penguin Boy was kicked on the cheek, and he grinned tearfully. Sure enough, the enemy is still unreliable. Ja Luo, the southwest side of Pate Company, the roof of a large house. Damn. You are such a hateful woman. Mikkel was about to hit Lilina several times, but the silk thread in the latter's hand swung around Mikkel's wrist, causing Mikkel to flicker. The palm of the palm with a faint blue light leads to the sky on one side. It's scary. A cat that bites is scary. Lilina's eyes seemed to be smiling, but she had a pitiful look on her face. Her eyes were flickering, but her figure was fast, and her movements were relentless. Once the silk thread in her hand was shot, it was like a bullet. The power is even higher by a few points. At the earliest time, this kind of special silk thread was used by her in performances, and she could do stunts like hanging in the air. Over time, it became her exclusive weapon, and this weapon is very sharp. Once it hits Mikkel on her body, she could directly cut a meticulous bloody gash on her face and arms. Mikkel wiped the wound on his cheek, and suddenly rushed forward again. As always, the silk thread in Lilina's hand was either twisted or shot, and 4 or 5 silk threads danced in the air at the same time, forming a lotus shape. Static dust. Mikkel's 2 cat ears trembled, and he glanced at the air from the corner of his eye. Stopped the figure immediately, and suddenly changed his moves, using static electricity to control and absorb the dust in the surrounding air or on the ground, rolling up 2 clouds of dust, and moving towards Lilina flung it away, and at the same time, the wind suddenly blew up, and a gust of north wind that seemed to be very cooperative suddenly blew in, carrying the dirty dust and pushing it towards Lilina, blocking her vision. Lilina loves cleanliness very much, or in other words, every naturally beautiful woman has a cleanliness habit. She looked at the dust that filled the air, and stepped back while frowning. Catfork. Regardless of whether it was dirty or not, Mikkel folded his hands together, piercing through the smoke and dust in an instant like a young sprout emerging from the ground, and his blue lightning-like body was constantly spinning in the air, like a sharp fork for fishing, piercing in an instant. It landed on Lilina's fine-skinned right abdomen before she could dodge in time. The latter let out a muffled grunt, feeling that the wound had been pierced by countless sharp needles, and her whole body couldn't help trembling. Just this time, Lilina's body covered her wound and squatted down, as if she couldn't stand up anymore, but her movement made Mikkel look like a frightened bird, and retreated a distance vigilantly, lest this cunning woman what kind of weird methods are going to be used. At this moment, Kaya, who was leaning against the corner of the platform, finally woke up leisurely. Lemon. Seeing that Kia woke up, Mikkel yelled happily, and his eyes fell on Kia, and he couldn't look away. Even Lilina, who was squatting on the ground with her stomach covered, raised her head in shock when she heard Mikkel's voice. You. How did you wake up so quickly? She fed Kia several red pills made from fanatic grass. According to normal circumstances, it was impossible for Kia to wake up so quickly. Kaya was still a little dazed, and slowly stood up. Crazy grass is a source of disease to the body's circulatory system, so after being forcibly fed by Lilina, the body will produce a specific anti-drug. Antibodies. This process will absorb a lot of energy in her body, which will cause her to fall into a coma. It's just that Kia's current situation is a little different. It's not simply because of the fanatic grass. Her devil fruit ability is also digesting the power gifted by this herb. Unlike ordinary people who eat it, this kind of stimulation for her, the power is permanent and harmless.
Why am I here? Kia still couldn't figure out the situation, and then looked at the source of the sound, first at Mikkel, then at Lilina, only feeling a little pain in her head.
It's okay, Lemon, let's go, Mikkel said quickly. After seeing Lilina's difficult methods, she actually didn't want to get entangled with her anymore. Now that Kaya was found, nothing happened. There is no need to do redundant things. It's just that she thought so, but it didn't mean the other party thought so too. Lilina flicked the silk thread in her hand and shot towards Kaya. Lemon, be careful. Mikkel was still some distance away from Kaya, and it was too late to run over, so he could only remind him loudly. Kia shook her head slightly, and woke up suddenly. For some reason, her eyes could suddenly catch the almost invisible and fast silk thread in the air. She subconsciously opened her right palm and stretched it out in front of her body. A brown bubble popped out of her palm, which suddenly grew bigger and covered the entire palm of her hand. When the silk thread from the air touched the bubble on her palm, it was refracted at right angles and parallel to the palm of her hand. It slid out and hit the parapet on the platform, shooting a small hole. Not only Lilina and Mikkel who stopped halfway, but even Kaya looked at the palms in disbelief. She felt that her reaction, vision and the speed of waving just now were much faster than before, although she didn't know what was going on. Lemon, you are amazing. Mikkel shouted in surprise as he watched the scene in front of him. Ah. Kia covered her mouth with the back of her hand, and listened to Mikkel's praise with some embarrassment. It's not very good. Mikkel rushed up quickly, picked up Kia as if no one else was there, turned around twice excitedly, held Kia's hand, and was about to leave.
Finally, Lilina, who was disconnected from the side, made a strange and painful voice. Her voice was originally as beautiful as an oriole, but at this moment it was like the voice of an old woman who was over 70 years old. The leaves are rubbing against each other.
Looking back, Lilina's skin began to wither, like a big tree that has been drained of water. Wrinkles and folds continued to climb up her cheeks, and even her hair was dyed white. Hunched, stumbling, and looking very miserable, the beautiful flower-colored dress on her body is even more contrasting at this moment. She groped her body with trembling hands for a while. She didn't seem to be carrying the red pill. Her withered face showed panic and uneasiness, and finally she fell to the ground unsteadily, with pitiful moaning intermittently. Save me. Help me. Move. Mikkel looked at Lilina's appearance. Although she felt sympathy in her heart, she felt very unhappy about what the other party had done, and she was very determined at the moment, but she found that she didn't pull Kia, so she wondered, you won't be moved with compassion, Lemon, she is the enemy. I know. Kaya's eyes hesitated for a while, and finally she was firm. If she didn't speak up, I wouldn't bother with her, but I'm a doctor. I can't ignore someone calling for help. Jalo, Wangshuda. Buggy dodges Diderot's double knife attack. Every time the latter swings a knife, a pale golden arc of airflow will appear 1 meter in front of Buggy and be hit. However, such a gorgeous opponent for Buggy, it was extremely thrilling. Diderot was astonishingly fast both in terms of attack speed and movement speed, and the slender mane on his hand, like a lancet, was even more domineering. Even if Buggy split apart, he would be rubbed by his sharp blade. Hurt. Such things as domineering can even capture and damage the natural elements in the flowing state, not to mention Buggy's physical body, but it is not impossible to dodge at all. Before swinging over, split the part where the opponent wants to slash to the two sides, and you can perfectly avoid the damage.
Although it sounds simple, it is actually not easy to do. As long as Diderot slightly changes his moves and direction, all the arrogance attached will hit Buggy. This is also the place where he has a headache. Combining Diderot's lunatic-like attack with his sword skills, Buggy dodges dangerously every time, and then finds a chance to charge up and fight back.
However, although Diderot's attack is fast, his weakness is also obvious. His physical strength is too easily stretched. The first 3 strikes were so fast that it was difficult for the naked eye to catch them. But after the 3rd strike, his movements slowed down significantly. Countless drops of sweat were secreted, and the sound of panting became more intense.
But even so, Diderot is still very strong. It is not that Buggy has never seen pirates who are stronger than Diderot, such as Whitebeard, Roger, and the Golden Lion, but these memories have long been drifting in the East China Sea for many years. As for Dust, he can't remember clearly. When he met Diderot, he suddenly felt the aura of a strong man from the previous era. This guy is probably a pirate at the Kibukai level.
As he himself said, if it wasn't for the limitation of age, his achievements would be far more than being trapped in a small country, but it was also his age that made him not so strong that Buggy couldn't parry. Golden hook wearing the moon. Diderot crossed his hands holding the lancet in front of him, and the curved sword points faced each other. The moment he slashed towards Buggy, the positions of his hands were cut flat, and the spreading air radiated light from the entrance of the cave. In the middle, it turned into a golden ring in the air.
Buggy has quick eyes and quick hands. At the moment Diderot approached with the domineering lancet, his body parts separated to the upper and lower sides. At the same time, his right foot suddenly exerted force towards the opponent.
Low-frequency kick. At this moment, his right foot, which looked like the old man's leg in the wind, kept trembling, but suddenly hit Diderot's abdomen, bursting out with absolutely terrifying force, knocking the latter into the air. Buggy quickly closed his body, landed on the spot and took a breath. He also used this move when he was fighting with Penn in front of the Chancellor's mansion, but he used the low-frequency finger gun at that time. But the difference between these two moves, the principle is exactly the same: resonance. All animals have their own inherent frequency when breathing, heartbeat, and blood circulation. The brain waves generated by the human brain during thinking activities also resonate. Even speaking, it is because of every tremor in the throat. Only by resonating with the air can others hear what you want to express. The power caused by resonance is very terrifying. For example, hundreds of soldiers stepped on the bridge at the same time, forming the same resonance frequency as the internal frequency of the bridge body, which caused the entire bridge to collapse.
In fact, before Buggy kicked this kick, his legs had been shattered into hundreds of fine particles, and then he used the power of returning life to simulate the internal vibration frequency of the human body to form a resonance frequency.
Resonance means that the physical system absorbs more energy from the outside world at the vibration frequency of the outside world. In other words, Buggy's foot directly sends all the energy from the outside world to the opponent's body. During the process of continuous energy absorption, the various parts of its body are constantly shifting, producing the effect of an energy explosion. However, using the fragmentation of the body to simulate the resonant frequency to form the oscillation of the entire energy often does not reach the highest peak of the frequency, and because the time for forming the frequency is too short, it can only be kept in the low frequency range. Similarly, the resonant frequency simulation and granular control of life return consumes a lot of physical energy, which makes it impossible for Buggy to use it at will, but its power is already on the boat slasher, Pung, and it can be seen. Diderot fell to the ground, his body returned to his human form, he staggered to his feet, and spit out a mouthful of blood. This blow hit him hard and hurt him, but his physical fitness seemed to be stronger than Pung En was much taller. It was not like the latter at this moment. After being hit by Buggy, all his strength was lost. In a panic, Diderot took out a large handful of red pills from his trousers pocket, stuffed them into his mouth, and swallowed them all with his throat throbbing a few times. At the beginning, he would take several pills made of fanatic grass every year to maintain his youthful state, but this result made his drug addiction more and more serious, and more specific antibodies were produced in his body. The efficacy of the medicine is getting worse and worse.
Since then, he has doubled the number of pills he took every year. Up to now, he needs to take hundreds of pills of crazy grass a year to maintain his current vitality, but the power brought by crazy grass is temporary and false after all. Yes, the more he eats, the less and less his real strength will be.
However, once he stops taking it, he will become a dying old man, and may die strangely in a few days. Diderot's current state is finally much better than before. At this time, he is not in a hurry to attack, but wants to digest and absorb the medicine in his body and slowly recover from his injuries. He looked at Buggy from a distance, and said slowly, "Do you know why I became the Minister of Finance in this country and spent years of hard work building a sufficiently powerful organization and platform?
It's because of the fountain of immortality."
Buggy also slowed down his rhythm and adjusted his breathing. In the battle just now, his physical strength was also consumed a lot, and he was very tired. Such a high-intensity battle was the first battle in his life. "You know a lot of information." The surprise in Diderot's eyes flashed, and he said without hesitation, "It is precisely because I drank a sip of the fountain of youth by accident 10 years ago that I let you. I have a second life. Can you imagine that I am 74 years old now?" 74 years old. Buggy looked at Diderot's still dark and thick hair with flickering eyes. "Indeed. You look about 50 or 60 years old. Is this the gift of the fountain of youth?"
"Yes, the fountain of immortality." Diderot's eyes suddenly became hot. "On this land, I tasted a mouthful of honey-like magical spring water by accident, and my body was restored to a youthful state. Later, I walked in this country. After collecting all the legends and gathering them together, I clearly know what I want to find in the end. All the painstaking efforts I have spent over the years are all for this legend that has been passed down for hundreds of years. However, I think you only look younger on the outside, but the inside of your body and all the organs are still being eroded by the years."
Buggy sneered disdainfully. "No one can escape the years and the established laws of this world. All creatures can only follow the laws of nature to go down step by step, from being hungry for food in childhood to being a teenager. Even Roger, The pirate king who has the greatest wealth, fame, and power in this world, cannot escape this iron rule after all. All the legends about longevity are nothing more than people's mouths in the beginning. It's just an anecdote passed down. Diderot's complexion changed, and he growled. No, this exists. I have seen it with my own eyes. You won't understand it. You simply won't experience the feeling of unprecedented power flowing through your body. This is the vitality of life, the vitality that brings me back to the peak. Bucky's voice was deep and indifferent. Yes. I don't know what you're obsessed with. You're already quite old. Just take care of your kids at home. Why come out and make trouble? Hee hee. Hee hee. Ha ha ha. Diderot laughed strangely, with a distorted expression on his face, which seemed weird and absurd against the scalp-numbing singing of the girls in the iron cage. What are you laughing at? Bucky frowned, feeling uneasy. After laughing bitterly, Diderot looked up at the girls in the cage, and finally said again, Look. These are the women I have cultivated for a long time, and now I have fed dozens of pills to each of them. You may not know that their singing can manipulate a shellfish that can still act because of this specific sound after death, and in this faster changing song, it will show more terrifying behavior. The power is like a group of termites gnawing on wood, gnawing, clean the ground of this land, and burying the entire island into the bottom of the sea. When Bucky heard Diderot's generosity with his own ears, he couldn't help but gasp. So you haven't found the fountain of youth. You feel that you have been deceived, and you want to destroy the entire island, right? No, you're wrong. If you can't find it on the ground, then the spring of immortality must be underground in the center of this island. Diderot's eyes widened suddenly, and he stared like a copper bell. The reason why this kind of shellfish can be attracted by sound after death is precisely because they were moistened and washed by the spring of immortality, and after death they can use their instincts to continuously dig the earth. As long as they feel the breath of the spring of immortality again, they will be able to send it to me. Bucky's eyes were heavy. It seems that Alex really didn't lie to me on this point. If you can't stop you, my crew and I will sink with the island. Diderot laughed and stuffed a large handful of red pills into his mouth again. If you are willing to join my fleet, I may be able to spare your life. After all, you are a rare good seed. Dream. Bucky exhaled a foul breath, stomped his feet, and rushed over as an afterimage. Whoever goes against me will perish. Diderot's body suddenly grew bigger, and his body swelled into a 3-meter-tall knife toad. He shot towards Bucky with his extremely flexible tongue. Not only the capital of Jalo, but several surrounding towns, and even the port of Lanang in the distance, could vaguely hear a trembling sound from the ground, as if the entire island was crying bitterly.
At this moment in the capital of the king, Jalo, all the people are huddled up in fear, or hiding under the tables, chairs and beds at home, or hiding in remote corners outside. However, there is no safe place in this city, whether it is everywhere, there was an endless stream of mourning.
These most ordinary people living in Gallo not only guard against the killing and looting of the pirates attached to the one-eyed family, but also avoid being hit by stray bullets that may be fired at any time on the battlefield. And at this time, hearing the devil's roar in the ground, this group of people who were born in peacetime almost collapsed. They didn't know what they did wrong, so they were disgusted by the gods and brought down such a disaster.
Hey, how many fat sheep are here? A few pirates with vicious faces passed an alley, and their eyes fell on a group of men, women and children who dared not go out and had nowhere to hide in the alley, and then looked at each other and talked.
Boss. How about it? Let's get out of here after a few more votes. HMPH. Of course I don't want to give my life to one-eyed here, so let's take advantage of the current chaos and take away all the gold, silver, treasures, women, and men who are used as slaves. Anyway, people in this country are vicious. Bastard. The leading man with the scar walked over to the trembling crowd with a ferocious expression, grabbed a girl about 18 years old from among them, and held it in his hand wantonly regardless of the girl's cries and pleas for help. Young man, put that child down quickly. This was an old man who was blaming from afar. You nasty pirates, sooner or later you will be arrested by the Royal City Guard. This was the voice of a 10-year-old child.
And most people choose to remain silent. They perform in front of people on weekdays, and even strangers can chat with each other familiarly, but the real human touch in their hearts is becoming more and more indifferent. The country of performing arts lured all the people in the country with money, power and fame, brought all the bad and hypocritical atmosphere to the entire king, and brought impetuous and exaggerated habits to the entire society. The whole Santon City is just like what Koshi said, it has begun to rot from the inside. Only the unworldly young children and the experienced elders still have the only courage and justice. Haha, royal guards. Stop joking.
The scarred man teared off the girl's pants in protest, revealing her snow-white skin. "Leave us alone, haha." Several pirates behind the man with the scar raised their sharp machetes and surrounded him. "Be quiet, otherwise, everyone will die." The girl struggled and shouted, "I don't want it, help me."
Her desperate struggle made the surrounding pirates frown, and one pirate wiped his neck. "Boss. This woman is too strong, and it's troublesome to carry, so let's get rid of it."
The man with the scar looked at the other pirates, asked for opinions with his eyes, and then responded fiercely, "Then kill her, let these bastards know the cruelty of pirates."
After finishing speaking, he drew out the short knife at his waist and was about to stab the girl's chest when suddenly his eyes blurred and his cheeks hurt, and he was knocked down to the ground with great force, and the girl in his hand rolled to the side, terrified. Squeezed into the crowd.
"Sorry, I didn't mean to." While apologizing, Shu Ma used this force to kick up and landed on the roof, then stopped and looked down curiously. "Hey, what game are you playing?" The man with the scar staggered to his feet and roared, "Damn you savage brat, get down for me." "You mean let me come down?" Shuma pointed to himself. Suddenly, Mochi's voice came from far behind him. "Hey, Shuma, stop talking, let's go, that navy is about to catch up." Shuma scratched his head, and fled into the distance with Mochi one after the other. The impediment kid who came out suddenly. The man with the scar spat out a bloody broken tooth from his mouth. He knew he couldn't catch up, so he had to say a cruel word, and then smiled sinisterly at everyone in the alley. "Anyone who dares to resist will be killed without mercy."
As soon as the words fell, the unlucky pirate only saw a few black shadows across the air, and suddenly there were several huge pulling forces on his clothes, and he was immediately nailed to the ground heavily by several black guns. His face paled with shock, the neck barely turned an angle, looked back, and the pirates behind him did the same.
Tina landed on the eaves, glanced at the group of pirates in disgust, picked up the phone bug and used it as a walkie-talkie. "The 6 pirates in the alley 600 meters northwest of the palace, I leave it to you to deal with." After she defeated the mermaid warrior, she chased all the way in the direction of Mochi, and then inexplicably got in with another person, that is, Shu Ma. On the way of chasing these two people, she had already seen 4 vicious incidents like this, but for the entire capital, the disaster was far more than that.
Tina frowned and looked at the direction where Shuma and Moki left, and finally gave up the pursuit, and fled in another direction. If the next energy was put on these two people, then those weaker innocent the people will suffer even greater disasters and sacrifices in this war.
Gallows Palace at this time. Koshi paced back and forth anxiously, hearing the sound of rats grinding their teeth in the middle of the night coming from the ground, and finally couldn't help shaking. The expression on his face didn't change much, but he was already worried and afraid in his heart. He finally took this step and got the crimson phone bug, but in the end he was still helpless against what Cyclops did. This trembling, absolutely it was Diderot who was digging out the ground, destroying the water and soil of the entire island, and turning the whole country from a warm and sunny spring into a dilapidated and desolate winter. Of course, the facts are crueler than he imagined. Once Diderot succeeds, the whole of Santander will sink to the bottom of the sea. Coochie. "King, please calm down, good news will come soon." The guard on the left, wearing light yellow knight armor, persuaded. "Calm down. I want to calm down," Coxey said, but tears fell from his eyes involuntarily. The royal guards need to deal with this war, and their strength must be stretched. This country is facing a life and death crisis, and we huddled in the palace. Calm down, how calm down? The head of the guard bowed his head and remained silent. It is precisely because Prince Kashi, who is so fraternal and has a heart for the country, is worthy of their following. If he can't even firm up his own beliefs, then he is no longer the daring Kashi. West. Coxey's gaze finally changed, and gradually became very firm. "Take my armor. I want to go to Wanshu Tower in person, and fight Diderot to the death." "Yes." All the guards responded loudly and sonorously, revealing their absolute love and trust for Prince Kashi, like a long sword showing its sharpness, and its momentum was like a rainbow. The door of the Chancellor of the Exchequer's residence. Jonathan stood outside the door with a team of people. He held a phone bug in his hand and kept receiving news reports from various naval units on how the pirates who rebelled in Galori were dealing with and the attitude of the Royal City Guard. Long ago, he got the news of Peng En's defeat, and later got a lot of useful information from Tina, but the more this happened, the more uneasy he became, and he faintly felt that the trajectory of all plans had disappeared. The sound deviated from his expectations. On the way here, he kept thinking about whether his deployment would cause a stronger chain reaction, and the trembling sound that could be sensed under his feet brought him an extremely strong wave. Feeling restless. What the hell is going on? Lieutenant General Jonathan. Finally, a captain-level navy came out of the mansion of Minister of Finance Diderot, and said to Jonathan with a serious face, "We have finished searching, and we have not found any suspicious passages or secret rooms in Di Kaluo's mansion. We have already interrogated Di Kaluo's subordinates in the mansion, and it was a man with a red nose who injured them." Red nose. Jonathan frowned, pulled out a few reward lists in his hand, and whispered, "Buggy, Shuma, Mochi, Kabaji." It's not the first time he's heard about the Baki pirates. Not long ago, the reputation of the worst in the East China Sea was heard in his ears, and he defeated Aaron and his gang with the highest bounty in the East China Sea. Then it's a joke. Smoker, the white hunter guarding Luoj town in the East China Sea. Aaron, the pirate Jonathan, has never heard of it, but Smoker's strength is obvious to all. Not only is he a student of Zephyr, but he is also one of the strongest fruit abilities in the natural system, which can force Smoker to the point of embarrassment. This Bucky only had a rough outline memory in his heart. Although I heard Tina talk about meeting Bucky the Clown at the port of Lannan later, Jonathan didn't take it seriously, that 2 hours ago, the ship cutter Peng En was defeated by Bucky and sent a phone call. What the bug reported made him feel that he had underestimated a lot of things, and Tina not only reported a lot of inside information about Pate's company, but also mentioned Mochi's entire pirate with a bounty list, which made him finally pay attention start this pirate group. Just as Jonathan was looking at the reward list in his hand, the soldiers beside him whispered the new information. Jonathan frowned, looked at the ground in surprise, and ordered with a serious face, "Notify. Everyone is ready to go to Wanshu Pagoda." This crustal movement, which is enough to affect the survival of the entire gallo, made the pirates in the navy fighting on the streets, or the Royal City Guards assisting the navy start to panic. Everyone stopped their attacks for a short while, and looked up in a certain direction involuntarily. Human beings have a natural dependence on the land, and the feeling of being down to earth is incomparable to anything. At this time, the vibration like an earthquake and the strange sound from the center of the earth made them have a kind of absurdity rushing straight into their minds from the bottom of their feet, as if in a lonely boat swaying in the sea, facing the stormy waves coming from all directions. And the closer to the direction of Wanshu Pagoda, the greater the vibration and the more frequent the frequency, that is the source of all vibrations. Jalo, Wangshuda. The battle became more and more intense, and the sound of bang 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 kept ringing in the air. Diderot's attacks were changeable. The lancet on his body, his hands, and his tongue were all his offensive weapons, and at this time they were used as long-distance weapons. The slender tongue that struck was fast and ruthless, because the shooting speed was too fast, and at the same time every time it was shot, a circle around the tongue that was nearly half a meter away would swing in the air and be dyed golden yellow by the light from the burrow. Airflow. Shaved. Moon drum. Bucky disappeared in place in an instant, with his feet on the ground. He suddenly staggered his footsteps at a certain rhythm point of the drumbeat, and quickly approached Diderot's left side. The life return control forms a resonant frequency, and the hands exert force instantly, low-frequency finger gun. Diderot's full-body animalization and half-body animalization have different limit speeds. Full-body animalization can bring him the superpower brought by the ancient knife toad, but at the same time it will reduce his speed. At this moment, his three-dimensional body is like a hill. Madogao's huge body is more like a durable sandbag. Bucky's move was about to stab Diderot's body. The latter suddenly turned around, and two exaggerated hands that were 3 or 4 times bigger than ordinary people suddenly pushed, directly pushing Bucky's whole body into the air. Bucky felt as if his body had been hit violently by a high-speed train. His throat felt sweet, blood spilled from the corner of his mouth, and the severe pain he felt in his chest almost made him faint. He listened to the sound of the wind pouring into his ears. Suddenly returning to his senses, he quickly changed his posture in the air, followed the force of being knocked into the air, bent his knees slightly, and stepped on the ground with both feet. The moment he stepped suddenly, his upper body separated, like a rocket booster, only half volume's upper body pushed towards Diderot. All this happened in an instant, and even Diderot was a little careless and didn't have time to take precautions. It seemed that a solid cable was wrapped around his thick neck, and his huge body weighing nearly a ton kept pulling back, and then it hit the iron cage hard. Suspended from the ceiling, the iron frame of the iron cage containing dozens of delirious girls was continuously dented, and in the blink of an eye, it was broken from the chains on the ceiling, and the whole thing was knocked out, accompanied by the girls inside. With a wild scream, the wall of Wanshu Pagoda was smashed into a crack, and embedded in it. And Diderot's body was pulled into the golden cave by this force, and he fell down unsteadily. He stretched out his hand to grab something, but he couldn't catch anything. The light source in the cave, it was instantly covered, forming a terrifying projection on the ceiling above the cave. After Buggy was shattered, the rope-shaped upper body returned to its original form, stopped in the air, and the lower body also moved rapidly under the control. The upper and lower parts fit together and fell to the ground. At this time, he was panting and looking at the burro Diderot, who has not moved for a long time. This guy, he should fall to his death. With such a huge size, the impact force he received when he landed at the end would definitely be astonishing. It's just that this kind of thought flashed by, and Buggy quickly stepped back. At this time, the hole in the ground opened a bigger hole like an explosion, and the gravel splashed everywhere. Diderot's huge body fell back to the ground again. He looked even more embarrassed than before. The various scratches and blood on the skin of his body should have been cut by the edge of the hole during the fall, but he finally still came back. He first looked at the girls in the iron cage who had stopped making any noise and didn't know what to do, then fixed his eyes on Buggy and growled coldly, "Buggy, do you know what good deed you have done?" Buggy's eyes were also red, and he looked at Diderot like a beast. "Since you dare to make a bet on the country, you must also be mentally prepared to plan bankruptcy, and you still want to ask me what good things I have done. I have worked so hard for so many years to obtain the fountain of immortality, to return to the new world, and to regain my hegemony. How can I let you stop my progress here? I will kill you, I must kill you." Diderot's introvertedness and prudence cultivated by hiding his strength and bide his time for many years was finally torn by him at this moment, revealing the most brutal and ferocious nature inside, like a crazy lunatic, rushing regardless of everything. "This world doesn't revolve around you. If you think you can kill me, then give it a try." After Buggy finished speaking in a cold voice, his body suddenly shattered into grains of sand following the light and shadow around him. In an instant, his whole body shattered into thousands of particles, exactly the same as the scene during the night when he went to Gelona. All the particles in the air, the body particles, are constantly vibrating, and the frequency is getting higher and higher. The space and the ground in the tower seemed to start to vibrate with this vibration, and the surrounding visible and invisible energy rolled and gathered. Overclocking dimension. In an instant, all the particles returned to human form, carrying an inestimable amount of energy, and punched in from Diderot's chest, making a very strong buzzing sound, and Diderot was suddenly blasted out behind him. An invisible airflow about several meters long, as if what was blown out this time was his soul. In the next moment, he flew straight back like a dilapidated sandbag with a whoosh. His body was constantly deforming and collapsing in the air due to the huge energy in his body that had no place to vent, and there were fine holes all over his body without breaking. Blood splashed out one after another, and finally fell to the ground motionless, as if dead. Because of the momentum of his palms, Buggy kept retreating, and lay flat on the ground with his back in a large font. After this move, his condition was also very poor. At this time, he was desperately moving the only finger that could move so far. All parts of the body lost consciousness due to numbness. He uses the super-frequency resonance simulated by the sand grains of his whole body to vibrate in the air, and drives the surrounding energy at a high speed in the high-frequency range. Compared with the low frequency, the power is more amazing, but the intensity is also higher, and the load on oneself, it was even bigger. This blow had already drained almost all of his energy and stamina. At this time, the vibrating sound of the ground due to the constant loosening of the shells disappeared, only the sound of a few drops of water coming from unknown places, the sound of insects flapping their wings emitting golden light from the entrance of the cave, and the sound of slapping. G's weak panting sound. This place seems to have turned into a deserted tomb, and no other movement can be heard. Finally, Buggy stood up staggeringly, his feet almost went limp, and he fell down again. His body was still trembling slightly involuntarily, until he got used to the coordination of his body. He walked slowly to Diderot's side, staring at each other. Diderot's skin was already dry and wrinkled, and his black and thick hair was now pale. His body was covered with countless blood holes caused by the explosion of energy in his body. On the ground, it makes people feel a little scalp numb. Buggy pokes at his snort. Not dead, but snort so weak it's almost dead. Suddenly, Diderot's eyes opened, and his hands and feet started to move. Buggy backed away quickly in fright. He was on guard, and his state had not yet recovered. Not so good. However, Buggy still thought too much. All the organs in Diderot's body were completely destroyed by the blow just now. The situation at this moment is more like a flashback before death, struggling with the last wave of faith. Diderot put his hands on the ground, stood up, and grinned maniacally, which was particularly harsh in this quiet semi-enclosed space. His eyes were wide open, and he limped towards the radiant hole. Walking, the rickety body let out a stern roar, It's mine. The fountain of youth is mine. No one can stop me. I want to return to the new world. Red hair. I want to kill that guy with red hair and dominate. To dominate everything. In the dim tower, his shouts with all his strength echoed constantly, like the last detachment of an ordinary old man in his later years, clinging to a dream that has been difficult to realize in his whole life, desolate and bleak. Bucky looked at him silently, watching him fall into the hole alone. In the final funeral surrounded by golden bugs, he continued to fall, and finally it was as if he had never appeared in this world before, and then also not visible. Life brings nothing with you, and you can't take anything with you when you die. Bucky murmured in a low voice. He suddenly lost the sense of pride and accomplishment of defeating Diderot, and the killing intent between life and death was much weaker. He just felt a little dull, picked up the coat in the corner and the bag inside the phone bug, picked up the upper half of the seafloor stone inlaid with 10 hands on the ground, put it in his coat, and walked unsteadily to the outside of the tower. Mr. Buffett. As soon as Bucky walked out of Wanshu Pagoda exhaustedly, he heard someone calling him from far away. No, it was calling him by his former name. Bucky raised his head and looked at Coxie, who was coming. It's you. Mr. Buffett. Why are you here? When Cozy arrived, he found that the tremors in the ground had disappeared. This change made him startled and suspicious. He was afraid that Diderot would make a more terrifying move. But when he saw Bucky, he was a little dumbfounded. He suddenly remembered this man with an unusual style of behavior asked about Diderot's information, and it just so happened that he also came out of Wanshu Tower at this time. The corners of Bucky's mouth curved slightly, outlining a sly smile. Killed your country's finance minister. Kei-shi stared wide-eyed and looked at Bucky in disbelief. The bloodstains on the latter's body, the fresh wounds that hadn't healed, and his exhausted state proved that he had indeed experienced a terrible battle just now. Coupled with the fact that he had just walked out of the Wanshu Pagoda and the vibration of the ground stopped, all of these proved that what the other party expounded was a fact, not just empty words.
Diderot is dead. After Kexi muttered in a daze, the boulder that had been hanging in his heart for many years fell to the ground with a bang. A strange lightness spread all over his body, and then he looked at Bucky with a serious face. Mr. Buffett, if you really killed Diderot, then you are the hero of our country.
Hero? No. I'm a pirate. When Jonathan came to Wanshu Tower, he was already behind Koshi. When he entered the tower, he didn't see anyone, only a large number of battle marks, so his face had to be serious. Has Koro fought anyone here? Then how about others? Why did they suddenly disappear? Later, he discovered the hole in the ground, the iron cage embedded in the wall, and the miserable-looking woman who had been dead for a long time. Move these corpses out and hand them over to special personnel for inspection. I need a report on the time of their death. Jonathan said to the accompanying officer at the side, and ordered someone to get a rope and a few soldiers. How many of you are there? Pull it up above. You. Go down and explore, and report immediately if there is any abnormality. The soldiers assigned to go down the cave wrapped up their ropes, put their feet on the rock wall in the cave, and slowly climbed down. Finally, the rope bottomed out, and the soldier's voice came from the phone bug used for communication. Master Lieutenant General, I can't see the bottom yet, I only see some shells around. Jonathan frowned. The rope has been placed for about 70 meters, but it has not yet bottomed out. How deep is the hole, and what are these shells? He pondered for a while, and said to the phone bug, come up. What is the relationship between this hole and the underground trembling just now, and what is going on here? Jonathan narrowed his eyes slightly, and slowly began to analyze the existing clues in his mind. After a whole day, Gallo's rebellion was finally quelled with the cooperation of the Navy and the Royal City Guards. Some pirates were executed on the spot, some were all arrested, and a small number of pirates escaped from Gallo. And the trembling of the ground begins without a head, and ends without a tail. However, since then, there has been another legend in this country. There is a demon sealed in the underground of Santa City. Every time the moon is full, he will struggle desperately and try to escape. All the surviving people in Jaluo looked haggard, most of them wept with joy and hugged their heads, and many people wept because their relatives were killed in this war. There are also special personnel in the various streets of the capital to clean up the corpses and clean up, and the order has gradually returned to normal. The second day after the war subsided, Jalo Palace, inner room. Bucky was lying on the big soft and comfortable bed, and he slept very comfortably. This was the first time in his life that he enjoyed the treatment of a king. A day ago, Bucky took the initiative to reveal his identity as a pirate. The purpose was also to test Koshi. Whether it was an enemy or a friend, it only needed to be seen from the facial expression changes on the other side in a split second. The result is not very surprising. For Koshi, the dislike of being a pirate is far less than the shock caused by killing the culprit Diderot and the gratitude for saving the entire country. And this gratitude was turned into a promise by Koshi. He was willing to agree to all of Bucky's requests that did not harm the interests of the country. Originally, Diderot's crimes and death should be made public, and Bucky should become a hero under the flag of this country, but the latter's pirate status is really inappropriate, which made Koshi make such a decision. There is a way to make up for the results of Bucky's desperate battle. Although Bucky's own intentions had nothing to do with the country's survival, he was also happy to push the boat along. The status of a country's crown prince was very helpful to him. Afterwards, he asked Koshi to send people to search for several of his partners. Under the cover of the latter, he entered the Jalo Palace.
Mr. Bucky. Koshi pushed the door and walked in. He already knew the identity of the other party, and it was not easy to call the name, Buffett, at this moment.
Bucky was not the only one in the room. After the war, Kabaji, Moki and others were found by the soldiers assigned by Koshi all over the capital, and they were brought to the palace under the direct dialogue of Bucky's phone bug. When they came to the palace, except for Shuma who was very energetic, everyone else was very tired, but after seeing that Kabaji was safe and sound, even Kabaji, who looked very indifferent on the outside, showed a smile on his face. With a rare sense of relief, let alone Shuma, he kept turning around Kia, smiling. On the contrary, the guilt and emotion in Kia's heart were mixed together. In order to save her, everyone chased from Xe Navasan all the way to King Jalo, and experienced various battles. It was the first time in her life that she felt this an indescribable feeling, like the perennial spring here, full of warm smells, warming to the bottom of my heart. This bedroom is 10 times larger than ordinary rooms. In one night, 5 or 6 people sat on the sofa around the coffee table and chatted for a long time, telling each other what happened on their side. Even Shuma was quiet. Listen quietly and stop making trouble. At the same time, green bubbles popped out of Kaya's palm, and healed everyone's injuries one by one with the ability of devil fruit. The green bubbles in her palm are tree sap, in other words, the blood that supports the growth of trees, that is, the life force, and the vitality of plants is stronger than human beings to some extent. On the human body, the wounds can be scarred quickly, and even it has a certain effect on the hidden diseases in the body. Under Kia's treatment, the injuries of Kabaji and the others recovered quickly, and even Bucky's cracked sternum could be cured. Healing begins without you knowing it. Afterwards, everyone fell asleep without knowing it, and has been sleeping on the sofa until now. It is already the next morning. Bucky walked down from the big comfortable bed in a high spirit, stretched his waist, pushed aside the curtains of the window, squinted his eyes to feel the sudden light, and slowly turned to look at Kashi. Your Highness. No, the King, Your Majesty, the environment here is really good. Koshi nodded politely, and then waved. The attendants behind him brought wash basins and toothbrushes for washing, and then another attendant walked in pushing a dining cart with various delicacies, and put the sumptuous food on the table. On the table. Kabaji, K-Ya and others also woke up leisurely. After K-Ya's treatment and a good night's sleep, their limbs were no longer as numb as they were yesterday. When they saw the food on the table, Mochi and Shuma taking the lead, Mikkel smelt the smell of fish, and didn't care about anything else. He immediately held the whole plate in his arms, his eyes flicked around warningly. No one can touch my grilled fish.
Kaya wasn't so impatient, she went to rinse her mouth and wash her face quietly first.
Kabaji was still sitting on the sofa, looking at Mochi who stuffed food into his mouth. Should goats eat grass? Moki suddenly turned around, raised a big chicken leg with his greasy hand, rushed to Kabaji, and stuffed it firmly in his mouth. You half flounder. Who are you talking about goats? Mr. Mochi is a great man. Beast tamer, bastard.
Kabaji had difficulty breathing, waving his hands wildly, and finally swallowed all the chicken legs and bones in his throat, gasping for breath. Yesterday he won the battle with Alex, but today he was almost choked to death by a chicken leg.
Mochi said triumphantly. How does the chicken drumstick that Mr. Mochi treats you to eat taste like? Kabaji looked annoyed. Asshole, I will fight with you. Immediately, chickens and eggs were thrown on the sofa. Kashi forcibly ignored the noise made by the two, and said to Bucky sincerely, Mr. Bucky, my original intention was to make your achievements known to the world, but in view of many things, now I can only wrong you here. It will be over. That's right. Bucky said, holding his right hand next to his right cheek, and then grasping it, as if nothing had happened, he grabbed a glass that flew over during the fight between the two of Kabaji, put it on the table, and poured it for himself. He took a sip of a cup of refreshing black tea. For pirates, too much fame is not necessarily a good thing. It will only strengthen the attention of the Navy and the world government, and cause a lot of trouble for our navigation. Heroes are those who distribute the looted treasures to others, and I am a pirate. Really? Cozy ignored the words robbed treasure in Bucky's mouth, and nodded solemnly. On the contrary, the slapstick Kabaji is very sensitive to the word hero, so that he looks back at Bucky from time to time. Kashi held Bucky, who was eating food in his mouth, and chatted for a while. A guard in knight armor walked in, whispered a few words beside Kashi, and then he stood up. My side, there are still some things to deal with, Mr. Bucky and the others. Please continue to rest here, but don't move around, or there will be some troubles. Bucky knew what the trouble was, nodded his head, and watched Kashi lead a group of people out. Then his eyes fell on Mikkel, who was holding a grilled fish and gnawed, with 2 cat ears trembling, and asked, Little cat, how long until the record pointer to the next island? Mikkel gnawed on the grilled fish and said vaguely, 2 more days. The main hall of the Gallo Palace. Koshi slowly walked out from the corridor of the apse, sat on the king's chair, smiled, and looked at the few people in his highness calmly. All take your seats, Lieutenant General Jonathan and this Colonel Tina and all the generals who came from afar. Hee. Thank you, King, for your hospitality. Jonathan smiled politely, and took the lead to take his seat. To be honest, Koshi transformed from the status of the crown prince to the king of a country in just 1 day yesterday. The Navy has no right to intervene in internal battles, not to mention the sudden change in the direction of action of the royal guards yesterday gave them a lot of help in arresting them. Such a king is more in line with his image of a king in his heart. The rest of the people also sat on the seats in the lower left hall. Jonathan had a calm temper and said with a smile at this moment, My G8 Fortress Jonathan, congratulations to King Kexi for being on the throne. Kashi did not show the impetuousness and complacency of the young man, but nodded with a smile. The two had a deal yesterday, and he knew the purpose of the other party's visit today, so he had already made plans. Jonathan said slowly, Your Majesty, yesterday the Royal City Guard cooperated with our Navy to capture the original pirate admiral, Smokesword, Alex, with a reward of 50 million, and the original Toad pirates with a reward of 40 million. Kadri Benson, and the combination of the 2 Kadris of the One-Eyed family. Thanks to your command and cooperation, we were able to take down these criminals who are at large in one fell swoop. Master Lieutenant General, you should take the lead. If you weren't in charge, this war would not have been quelled so quickly. What Koshi said was true. If the Navy hadn't stepped in and invested a lot of troops, the overall trend of this war might have developed in another direction. Jonathan said. But most of the pirates I mentioned were actually defeated by other people, and the original pirate Dikela, the current finance minister of Santander, Diderot, disappeared in this battle. Is that so? Kashi heard the conversation of Bucky's group last night, and knew who knocked down these one-eyed family cadres, but at the moment he put on a puzzled expression on his face. I got the news before that the Wanshu Pagoda in Jalo was the source of the vibration and noise in the ground yesterday. When we arrived at the Wanshu Pagoda, we only found a bunch of haggard-looking women's corpses in the cage and a group of shells underground. The death time of the corpse was inspected by a special person. It should have been an hour before we arrived, and it happened that the vibration of the Earth's center stopped at that time. Afterwards, we collected some information, and we can judge that the shells under the ground can be killed by a person. This kind of rhythm control, use instinct to carry out activities. At present, I have a speculation that Diderot used these women who can sing a certain rhythm to control a large number of shells in the Wanshu Tower, causing damage to the center of the Earth, and this damage will cause extremely dire consequences. The king in this regard, it should be clearer than me, an outsider, so I thought, could it be your warriors who stopped Diderot's plot? If so, it would make sense. Jonathan looked at Keishi seriously, but a gleam flashed in his eyes. What he said was actually a trap. If Koshi admitted that Diderot was defeated by his subordinates, then he must be induced by himself to choose someone to be the warrior. Unprepared warriors will definitely show their feet in the following conversations. In this way, paradoxes will appear in Koushi's words, and the truth of the matter will be revealed step by step in this rhythm. It would be easier if Koshi admitted that it was not the case. Since the person who defeated Diderot was not under Koushi's subordinates, he must be an outsider. According to Tina's information, the person with such strength must have appeared in Jalo Bucky and his gang, and Jonathan will have sufficient evidence to prove that Bucky the Clown has entered the palace, no matter whether Koshi admits it or not, or for what purpose to protect Bucky and his gang. Force Nathan has a way to get the opponent to hand over Bucky. This is his self-confidence and sophistication. I thought Diderot was captured by your navy, didn't it? Coxey took Jonathan's words calmly, glanced at the queue below, and asked in a loud voice. So, Which warrior under my king's command took down the traitor Diderot? Come out, my king, there are many rewards. After the words fell, all the guards took a step forward at the same time, and said, it's me. Keishi glanced around, waved his hand slowly, go back to the queue. Then he looked at Jonathan with a look of embarrassment. The soldiers under him like to fight for merit, so the lieutenant general will laugh at him gone. This. Jonathan was stunned for a moment. Cauchy's move to confuse the public was beyond his expectations. The young king showed a political wisdom that didn't match his age. Denied, he caught the kicked ball, but kicked the ball away again, making it impossible for anyone to continue playing. Seeing this, Tina, who was sitting under Jonathan, finally stood up. Regardless of whether this was a palace or not, she lit a thin cigarette and said with a rather strong attitude, King Kashi, people don't speak secretly. Tina's subordinates saw the pirate Buggy enter the Gallo Palace with their own eyes. As the majestic king of a country, don't you want to protect a pirate? As if practicing Tai Chi, Kashi said, as the king of a country, how could I cover up a pirate? Colonel Tina's subordinates may have misread it. Hearing this, Jonathan sighed secretly. He thought he was just a kid at first, but he didn't expect the other party to be able to talk without leaking, like a hedgehog with thorns all over his body, making it impossible to start. As a member of the world government, Santon City's navy cannot use force or have conflicts in this kind of place. Unless they can issue an arrest order directly issued by the world government and search the palace, there is no way for Cauchy's Tai Chi. Number. In the main hall, Koshi and the navy were sparring, while Baki and the others in the bedroom were enjoying themselves. Kia asked the guards and wanted to rent the medical books in the palace, and Mikkel watched them hanging in the bedroom. The overall picture of the island on the wall, Kabaji holding the scabbard and swinging the sword while feeling the state of cutting off the existence before. Mochi held the phone bug and ordered Li Chi to drive the boat to the northern port closest to Gallo. But under the scornful gazes of the crowd, he finally let go of this idea. How can a lion drive a whole ship over? So Mochi was ordered by Buggy to go with Mikkel to bring the pirate ship moored at the south port. Because of the record pointer, he still needs to stay on this island for 2 days, so he still cannot leave this island for the time being. Islands. Afterwards, Buggy rummaged through the entire bedroom, and the guards guarding the door hurriedly dissuaded him, but Buggy just had a sly look in his eyes, and said, don't worry, your king will want me to do this.